Greetings, cozy knights. Lower your swords and rest by the fire. Tonight, we journey through the complete history of the College of Winterhold, from its ancient foundations to its mysteries that remain unsolved to this day. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from tonight. But for now, let's get cozy and journey through the complete history of the College of Winterhold together. The ancient foundations. The College of Winterhold stands as one of the most enduring monuments to magical study in all of Tamriel, perched precariously on the northern edge of Skyrim, where icy winds howl through stone corridors and ancient secrets sleep beneath layers of frost. To understand this institution is to understand the very nature of magic itself, how it has been pursued, feared, celebrated, and hidden throughout the ages. The college's story begins not with its physical construction, but with the dreams of mages sought a sanctuary where knowledge could flourish without the interference of kings, warriors, or the fearful masses who viewed magic as something dangerous and unnatural. Long before the college took its current form, magic in Skyrim existed in a fragmented state, practiced by solitary hermits in mountain caves, passed down through family lines in whispered traditions, or wielded by chieftains who claimed divine favor. The early Nords, those who first crossed the Sea of Ghosts from Atmora, brought with them a complicated relationship with magic. They respected the power of the Thu'um, the voice that could shake mountains and split the sky, but they viewed traditional spellcasting with suspicion. To them, magic was the domain of their enemies, the elves who had enslaved them, the dragons who had ruled them, and the spirits who haunted the wild places. Yet even among these warrior people, there were always those whose souls yearned for understanding, who saw in magic not just a weapon, but a key to unlocking the fundamental mysteries of existence. The first recorded attempt to establish a formal school of magic in Skyrim dates back to the early First Era, not long after the founding of the First Empire of Men. Ysgramor himself, the legendary hero who led his people to Skyrim, was said to have employed mages in his campaigns against the Snow Elves, recognizing that magic had its place in warfare, even if his heart belonged to the axe and the sword. After the establishment of Sarthal, the first human city in Skyrim, scholars began to gather, drawn by rumors of ancient artifacts buried beneath the frozen earth. These early scholars were not organized, not unified by any common philosophy or purpose beyond curiosity. They studied independently, competing as often as they cooperated, and their discoveries were jealously guarded secrets rather than shared knowledge. It was during this time that the location which would one day hold the College of Winterhold first revealed its significance. The rocky outcropping overlooking the Sea of Ghosts possessed unusual properties that any mage with even basic sensitivity could detect. The flow of magicka in this region felt different, stronger, more stable than elsewhere in Skyrim. Some theorized that ancient ley lines converge beneath the earth in this spot, creating a natural focal point for magical energy. Others believed that something was buried deep below, an artifact or relic of tremendous power that radiated its influence upward through layers of stone and ice. The most mystical scholars whispered that this place existed at a thin point in reality, where the boundaries between Mundus and the realms beyond grew permeable, allowing magic to flow more freely. The first structures built on this site were crude affairs, little more than reinforced tents and wooden halls that offered scant protection from the brutal northern weather. Yet even these primitive facilities attracted students, young men and women, who had shown magical talent and sought training that their villages could not provide. The early instructors were a diverse lot: former battle mages who had grown weary of war, curious scholars who had spent decades studying ancient texts, and rogue mages who had fled from persecution in other lands. They taught what they knew, establishing the foundations of what would become the college's curriculum, though in those early days, instruction was haphazard and dangerous. Students who showed promise advanced quickly. Those who lacked talent or discipline often died in magical accidents, their bodies buried in the frozen earth with little ceremony. The true founding of the college as an institution occurred during the reign of High King Harold, grandson of Isgramor, who ruled from the year 1143 of the First Era until his death in 1221. Harold was a warrior in the mold of his grandfather, but he possessed a strategic mind that recognized the value of magical knowledge. During his campaigns to expand Nordic territory southward, he employed court mages, who proved invaluable in sieges and battles against the Chimer and Dwemer. Recognizing that Skyrim needed a reliable source of trained mages, Harold decreed that a formal college of magic should be established. He provided funding from the royal treasury, granted the mages at Winterhold official sanction and protection, and even donated several powerful artifacts from his grandfather's hoard to serve as teaching tools. The construction of the college's main buildings began in earnest in the year 1156 of the First Era. Master architects were brought from Solitude, and even as far as Cyrodiil, to design structures that could withstand Winterhold's harsh climate, while also serving the unique needs of magical study. The main hall was built first, its foundations sunk deep into the bedrock and reinforced with both traditional masonry and enchantments designed to prevent structural damage from magical experimentation. The Great Bridge, that would eventually become the college's most iconic feature, was engineered to span the growing chasm that separated the college grounds from the city proper, a gap that would only widen over the centuries as erosion ate away at the cliff face. The architectural design of the college incorporated principles that blended Nordic practicality with magical theory. The towers were positioned to align with celestial bodies, creating natural focal points for astronomical observation and astral projection. The courtyard was designed as a perfect circle, allowing for the creation of ritual spaces that could be easily adapted for different schools of magic. Underground chambers were excavated deep into the stone, creating a labyrinth of storage rooms, research laboratories, and secure vaults where dangerous artifacts could be kept away from curious students. Even the choice of materials reflected magical considerations. The stone used in construction was quarried from deposits that naturally resisted the corrupting influence of certain forms of magic, while metals incorporated into the structure were alloyed with silver and other materials known to conduct magical energy effectively. As the physical structures took shape, so too did the college's organizational structure. The first Archmage, a Nord wizard named Aren, whose family name has been lost to history, established many of the traditions that would endure for millennia. He declared that the college would serve as a sanctuary for all who sought magical knowledge, regardless of their race, background, or previous affiliations. This was a radical notion in the First Era, when racial tensions ran high and trust between humans and elves remained fragile at best. Yet Aren believed that magic transcended such petty divisions, that the pursuit of knowledge required setting aside prejudice and working together toward common understanding. Aren also established the college's fundamental principles regarding magical ethics and responsibility. He taught that magic was neither good nor evil, but a tool that could be used for either purpose depending on the intentions of the wielder. He emphasized the importance of discipline and control, warning students that reckless spellcasting endangered not just themselves, but everyone around them. Under his guidance, the college developed its first formal curriculum, dividing magic into distinct schools based on the nature of the effects produced. Destruction magic, the art of channeling raw energy into offensive spells, was taught alongside restoration, the healing arts that could mend wounds and cure diseases. Alteration magic, which manipulated the fundamental properties of matter and energy, found its place next to illusion, which affected the minds and perceptions of living beings. Conjuration, the summoning of creatures and objects from other realms, was studied carefully alongside mysticism, the school that dealt with the manipulation of magical forces themselves. The early college attracted students from across Skyrim and beyond. Young Nords who had shown magical talent came seeking training that would allow them to serve as court wizards or adventurers. Dunmer refugees from Morrowind arrived with knowledge of Telvanni magic and ancient traditions. Bretons from High Rock brought their natural magical affinity and sophisticated understanding of enchantment. Even a few Altmer made the dangerous journey from the Somerset Isles, drawn by reports of discoveries being made in this remote northern outpost. These students brought with them diverse magical traditions and techniques, enriching the college's knowledge base and ensuring that its teachings remained broad and inclusive, rather than focus solely on Nordic approaches to magic. The first library was established during this founding period, initially consisting of a single large room lined with shelves carved directly into the stone walls. Manuscripts were acquired through purchase, donation, and in some cases, less ethical means. Court mages who retired to the college brought their personal collections. Adventurers who raided ancient ruins donated or sold texts they could not read. Scholars copied manuscripts from collections across Tamriel, laboriously reproducing text by hand, since the printing press would not be invented for several more eras. The library's collection grew steadily, encompassing not just magical theory, but also history, philosophy, astronomy, alchemy, and countless other fields of study. It became a point of pride among the college's masters that their library rivaled those of the great cities, containing knowledge that could be found nowhere else in Skyrim. Yet even in these early days, the college faced challenges that would persist throughout its long history. The common people of Winterhold viewed the mages with suspicion and fear. Stories circulated of students who had been transformed into monsters by failed experiments, of demons summoned and left uncontrolled, of explosions that shook the city walls. While many of these tales were exaggerated or entirely fabricated, enough genuine accidents occurred to give them a kernel of truth. The college's masters worked to maintain good relations with the city, offering magical services to residents in need and contributing to the defense of Winterhold when threats arose. Yet the fundamental divide between those who wielded magic and those who feared it never fully healed. The college also struggled with internal conflicts as different factions of mages competed for influence and resources. Traditionalists who believed in the old Nordic ways clashed with reformers who sought to incorporate elven magical techniques. Practical mages, who focused on useful applications of magic, butted heads with theoreticians, who pursued knowledge for its own sake. These conflicts occasionally erupted into open confrontation, with duels being fought in the courtyard, and political maneuvering determining which instructors received the best facilities and most promising students. Yet somehow, the college endured these growing pains, its fundamental mission of magical study proving stronger than any factional dispute. As the First Era progressed, the College of Winterhold established itself as one of the premier magical institutions in Tamriel. Its reputation spread far beyond Skyrim's borders, with mages from distant lands speaking of the achievements being made in that frozen northern school. The foundations laid during these early decades would support the college through countless crises in the centuries to come, ensuring that even when the world around it changed dramatically, the institution itself remained a constant beacon of magical learning in a realm that often viewed such pursuits with suspicion and fear. The first Archmages and early traditions. The early leadership of the College of Winterhold shaped not just the institution itself, but the very nature of magical study in Skyrim for generations to come. These first Archmages were visionaries who understood that they were building something meant to last through the ages, and their decisions regarding curriculum, ethics, and organization established patterns that would endure even when the world around the college changed beyond recognition. Each of these early leaders brought their own philosophy and expertise to the role, ensuring that the college developed a diverse and comprehensive approach to magical education, rather than becoming narrowly focused on any single school or tradition. Aaron, the first Archmage, served in that capacity for nearly 40 years, an exceptionally long tenure that allowed him to see his vision for the college fully realized. Before coming to Winterhold, Aaron had served as a court wizard for one of the minor Nordic kingdoms that existed before their consolidation under High King Harald. He had witnessed firsthand how magic could be misused by the ambitious and feared by the ignorant, and he was determined to create an institution that would train mages to use their powers responsibly. Aaron was a master of all schools of magic, though his particular expertise lay in alteration and mysticism. He believed that these schools, which dealt with fundamental magical forces and the manipulation of reality itself, formed the foundation upon which all other magical disciplines rested. Under Aaron's guidance, the college developed its first formal testing and ranking system for students. New arrivals were evaluated to determine their natural affinity for magic and their existing level of skill. Those with no prior training began as novices, learning basic spells and magical theory under the supervision of more experienced students. As they demonstrated competence, they advanced to apprentice, then adept, finally achieving the rank of expert in their chosen specialization. The most accomplished students, those who had mastered multiple schools of magic and contributed original research to the college's body of knowledge, could be elevated to master, though this rank was rarely granted and highly coveted. Aaron also established the tradition of the Archmages' quarters, a suite of rooms atop the tallest tower where the college's leader could work undisturbed on research and administrative duties. The quarters included a private study lined with bookshelves, a laboratory equipped with the finest magical instruments, and a small bedchamber where the Archmage could rest between long nights of research. More importantly, Aaron enchanted these rooms with powerful protective wards that would endure for centuries, ensuring that the Archmage would be safe from assassination attempts or magical attacks. These enchantments were layered and sophisticated, creating a network of defensive magic that would alert the Archmage to any intrusion and could even seal the rooms entirely if necessary. When Aaron finally died in the year 1196 of the First Era, having served as Archmage until age claimed him, the college faced its first leadership transition. The selection of a new Archmage proved contentious, with several powerful mages believing themselves worthy of the position. Rather than allowing conflict to tear the college apart, the senior masters established a tradition that would govern such transitions in the future. The Archmage would be selected by a council of masters representing each major school of magic, who would deliberate until reaching consensus on the candidate best suited to lead. This process could take days or even weeks, but it ensured that no single faction could dominate the college and that the chosen Archmage commanded broad respect and support. The second Archmage was a Dunmer woman named Elvali Venim, whose selection marked a significant moment in the college's history. Elvali had come to Winterhold as a young refugee fleeing political turmoil in Morrowind, bringing with her knowledge of Telvanni magical traditions that were unknown in Skyrim. She quickly distinguished herself as a brilliant conjurer and researcher, making significant advances in the understanding of Oblivion and the creatures that inhabited it. Her elevation to Archmage demonstrated the college's commitment to judging mages based on their abilities and contributions rather than their race or origin, a principle that would be tested repeatedly over the centuries. Elvali's tenure as Archmage saw the expansion of the college's facilities and the formalization of its relationship with the city of Winterhold. She negotiated agreements that established clear boundaries between the college and the city's civil government, ensuring that mages would not be subject to interference from local jarls or guards, while also committing the college to provide magical assistance during emergencies. She also oversaw the construction of additional towers and buildings to accommodate the growing student population, including the Hall of Elements, a grand circular chamber that would become the centerpiece of the college's public activities and ceremonies. Under Elvali's leadership, the college developed its first comprehensive safety protocols for magical research. She had witnessed too many promising students die in preventable accidents, and she was determined to create guidelines that would minimize such tragedies. Dangerous experiments were required to take place in specially warded chambers where explosions or magical backlash could be contained. Students working with summoning magic had to demonstrate mastery of binding and banishment spells before attempting to call forth any creature more dangerous than a familiar. Powerful artifacts were locked in secure vaults with multiple enchantments, preventing unauthorized access. While accidents still occurred, Elvali's protocols significantly reduced their frequency and severity. Elvali also recognized the importance of practical magical training, ensuring that students learn not just theory, but how to apply their knowledge in real situations. She established the tradition of the practical examination, where students seeking advancement in rank had to demonstrate their abilities through actual spellcasting rather than merely reciting what they had learned from books. For destruction mages, this might mean hitting moving targets with offensive spells while under pressure. Restoration students had to heal simulated wounds and cure magically induced ailments. Conjurers had to summon and control progressively more dangerous creatures until they reached the limits of their ability. The third Archmage, a Nord named Thorstein the Unbound, brought yet another perspective to the college's leadership. Thorstein had been a student during Arin's time and had learned directly from the college's founder. His specialty was destruction magic, and he was renowned for the power and precision of his offensive spells. Some questioned whether a destruction mage should lead an institution dedicated to all forms of magic, but Thorstein quickly proved his worth. He understood that magic was viewed with suspicion, in part because people saw it primarily as a weapon, and he worked tirelessly to demonstrate the peaceful applications of magical power. Thorstein established the college's first outreach programs to the surrounding communities. He sent students and masters on expeditions to nearby villages where they could use restoration magic to heal the sick. alteration magic to improve farming yields, and conjuration magic to help with heavy labor. These programs did much to improve relations between the college and common folk, showing that magic could be a force for good rather than something to be feared. He also created opportunities for non-mages to study at the college, establishing courses in alchemy, enchanting theory, and magical history that required no inherent magical ability to pursue. During Torsten's tenure, the college also began sending expedition teams to explore Skyrim's ancient ruins in search of lost magical knowledge. The Nordic landscape was dotted with remnants of previous civilizations, from the snow elves who had been driven underground to the mysterious dragon cult that had once dominated the land. These ruins often contained powerful artifacts, ancient spells, and historical records that could expand the college's understanding of magic's role in Skyrim's past. The most successful of these expeditions returned with treasures that would become centerpieces of the college's collection, including several dragon priest masks and numerous examples of enchanted Nordic weapons. The fourth Archmage, whose name was recorded simply as Callisto, was a Breton who specialized in enchanting and mysticism. Callisto's greatest contribution to the college was the establishment of the Arcanaeum, the college's great library, as a formal institution with dedicated staff and resources. Before Callisto's time, the library had been maintained haphazardly, with volumes shelved wherever space could be found, and little systematic organization. Callisto hired professional librarians, established a cataloging system, and secured funding for the acquisition of new texts. Under his watch, the Arcanaeum grew into one of the finest magical libraries in all of Tamriel. Callisto also formalized the college's relationship with other magical institutions across the continent. He established correspondence with the Crystal Tower in Somerset Isle, the great libraries of High Rock, and even the Telvanni Wizards of Morrowind. These connections allowed for the exchange of knowledge and techniques, ensuring that the college remained current with magical developments elsewhere in Tamriel. Visiting scholars began arriving at Winterhold, spending months or years studying in the Arcanaeum and sharing their expertise with the college's students and masters. The early traditions established during these first archmagical tenures became deeply embedded in the college's culture. The morning assembly, where all students and masters gathered in the courtyard to discuss news and assignments, became a daily ritual. The Festival of the Mind, held each year on the winter solstice, celebrated magical achievement with demonstrations of skill, scholarly presentations, and the bestowal of honors upon those who had made significant contributions. The tradition of the Master's Project, where students seeking to advance to master rank had to complete an original piece of magical research or create a new spell, ensured that the college continued to expand the boundaries of magical knowledge. Perhaps most importantly, these early Archmages established the principle that the college existed primarily to serve the pursuit of knowledge rather than any political or military agenda. While the college maintained cordial relations with Skyrim's rulers and would provide assistance during times of crisis, it guarded its independence jealously. The Archmage answered to no Jarl, no king, no emperor. This independence sometimes created tension with secular authorities who wanted to command the college's resources, but it also ensured that mages could pursue their research without fear of political interference. The legacy of these first Archmages echoed through the centuries. Each brought their own vision and priorities to the role, but all shared a fundamental commitment to magical education and research. They understood that they were building something meant to outlast their own lifetimes, creating an institution that would serve generations of mages yet unborn. The traditions they established became the foundation upon which all subsequent generations would build, ensuring that the College of Winterhold would remain true to its core mission, even as the world around it changed in ways they could never have imagined. The Great Collapse and its aftermath. The catastrophe known as the Great Collapse stands as the defining tragedy in the College of Winterhold's long history. A single night of destruction that claimed hundreds of lives and forever altered the relationship between the college and the city it had called home for thousands of years. What makes this disaster particularly haunting is that despite extensive investigation by the finest magical minds in Tamriel, the true cause remains shrouded in mystery and dispute. Some blame the college's magical experiments. Others point to natural geological forces. A few whisper of darker causes involving Daedric interference or ancient curses awakened. The truth, if it exists at all, lies buried beneath the icy waters of the Sea of Ghosts, along with most of Old Winterhold. The night of the Great Collapse began like any other in the year 4E 122. Winter had settled over Skyrim with its usual ferocity, blanketing Winterhold in snow and ice. Inside the college, students and masters went about their routines, some studying in the Arcanium, others practicing spells in training chambers, a few working late in laboratories on research that couldn't wait until morning. The city beyond the college's walls was quiet, its residents huddled in their homes against the bitter cold. Nothing in the weather or the stars suggested that this night would be any different from countless others that had passed peacefully. There was no warning, no omen, no chance to prepare for what was coming. The destruction began shortly after midnight, with a sound that survivors described as the earth itself screaming. Deep underground, something gave way with catastrophic force. The ground heaved and buckled, throwing people from their beds. Buildings that had stood for centuries crumbled as their foundations shifted. The stone bridge that connected the college to the city proper cracked and partially collapsed, leaving only a narrow span barely wide enough for a single person to cross. But the worst was yet to come. The ground beneath most of the city simply disappeared, dropping away in massive sections as the cliff face collapsed into the sea below. Entire neighborhoods vanished in moments, taking their sleeping inhabitants with them. The marketplace, the temple district, the wealthy merchant quarter with its grand houses, all plummeted into the churning waters of the Sea of Ghosts. The screams of the falling were mercifully brief, quickly swallowed by the roar of collapsing stone and the crash of waves against newly exposed cliff faces. Those who survived the initial collapse found themselves in a nightmare landscape where familiar streets ended in yawning chasms and buildings teetered on the edge of oblivion, their foundations hanging over empty air. The college itself survived relatively intact, though not without damage. The protective enchantments that had been woven into its foundations thousands of years earlier held firm, creating a stable island of stone that resisted the forces tearing the surrounding land apart. Yet even with these protections, parts of the college were lost. The western tower, which had housed astronomical equipment and laboratories for studying the stars, cracked from foundation to peak and had to be abandoned before it could collapse entirely. Several dormitory buildings near the edge of the college grounds tilted dangerously, their foundations undermined, and had to be hastily evacuated. The great gates that had stood at the college's entrance were torn from their moorings, leaving the courtyard exposed to the elements. The immediate aftermath was chaos, Students and masters rushed to aid survivors in what remained of the city, using magic to pull people from collapsed buildings and heal the injured. Restoration mages worked through the night and into the next day, exhausting themselves as they mended broken bones and closed wounds. Alteration specialists used their magic to shore up unstable structures, preventing further collapses. Conjurers summoned Daedra to help clear rubble and rescue those trapped in the debris. Every able-bodied mage in the college threw themselves into the rescue effort, setting aside research and studies to help however they could. Despite these heroic efforts, the death toll was staggering. Of Winterhold's pre-collapse population of several thousand, only a few hundred survived. Entire families were wiped out. Generations of history and culture vanished in a single night. The survivors were left homeless and traumatized, many having lost loved ones and all their possessions. The college opened its doors to refugees, transforming training halls and even the Arcanium into temporary shelters where survivors could find warmth and safety while they processed what had happened. For weeks, the college grounds were filled with the grief-stricken and the lost, people who wandered in shock or wept for those who would never return. The question of what had caused the disaster consumed the college's masters. Some believed it was a natural event, the result of geological instability that had been building for years or even centuries. The coastline of northern Skyrim was known to be unstable, with erosion constantly eating away at the cliff faces. Perhaps the weight of the city, built up over thousands of years, had finally exceeded what the underlying rock could support. This theory was supported by the fact that collapses, while never approaching the scale of the Great Collapse, had occurred before in Winterhold's history. The city had always known it lived on borrowed time, perched on cliffs that would eventually give way to the sea. But others pointed accusingly at the college itself, claiming that magical experiments had destabilized the ground and brought disaster upon the city. They noted that the college had been conducting research into alteration magic capable of manipulating stone and earth, experiments that could have inadvertently weakened the cliff face. Some claimed to have felt unusual vibrations or magical disturbances in the days before the collapse, tremors in the flow of magicka that suggested powerful spells being cast in the college's deepest laboratories. The fact that the college survived largely intact while the city was destroyed seemed suspicious to these critics, as though the mages had protected themselves while allowing the common folk to perish. A few scholars proposed even darker explanations. They pointed to obscure texts that mentioned ancient wards and seals placed beneath Winterhold during the First Era, protective enchantments meant to contain something dangerous buried in the earth. Perhaps these seals had finally failed after thousands of years, releasing whatever they had been holding back. Others suggested Daedric involvement, noting that the timing of the collapse coincided with certain astrological alignments that were significant in Daedric worship. Could a cult have performed a ritual that weakened the barriers between Oblivion and Mundus, creating instability that manifested as the collapse? The Archmage, at the time of the collapse, was a high elf named Deneth, a master of alteration magic, who had served in the position for nearly 30 years. Deneth took the disaster personally, feeling that he had failed in his duty to protect both the college and the city. He ordered a comprehensive investigation, assembling teams of mages to study every aspect of what had happened. Earth mages examined the collapsed cliff face, searching for evidence of magical interference. Historians pored over ancient records, looking for precedents or warnings that might have been overlooked. Seers attempted to look backward through time, though the chaos of the collapse itself made such efforts difficult and unreliable. Despite months of intensive investigation, no definitive answer emerged. The evidence was contradictory and incomplete, supporting multiple theories, but proving none. Deneth ultimately published a report acknowledging that the true cause might never be known, a conclusion that satisfied no one. To those who had lost everything, the college's inability to explain what had happened felt like a betrayal, adding insult to the injury they had already suffered. Relations between the college and the remaining citizens of Winterhold, never entirely warm even before the collapse, grew poisonous with mutual resentment and suspicion. The survivors who remained in Winterhold rebuilt what they could, but the city would never regain its former glory. Where once a thriving port had stood, with thousands of residents and bustling trade, now only a small village clung to the remaining land. Buildings were constructed with extreme caution, placed as far from the cliff edge as possible, and built from lighter materials that wouldn't stress the remaining ground. The grand architecture of old Winterhold, its stone buildings and soaring towers, was replaced by modest wooden structures that could be abandoned quickly if further collapses occurred. The city that had once been one of Skyrim's jewels became a shadow of itself, a cautionary tale about hubris and the dangers of building in unstable places. For the college, the aftermath of the Great Collapse brought both practical and philosophical challenges. The physical damage could be repaired. The western tower was demolished and rebuilt with reinforced foundations. The bridge to the city was partially reconstructed, though left narrower than before as a reminder of what had been lost. New wards and protective enchantments were layered over the college's foundations, incorporating lessons learned from studying how the original protections had held during the collapse. These repairs took years and consumed enormous resources, but they could be completed. The damage to the college's reputation proved harder to fix. Across Skyrim, people spoke of the college with suspicion and fear. Parents who might have sent magically gifted children to Winterhold for training instead sought other options or simply suppressed their children's talents. Mages who might have donated books or artifacts to the Arcanium instead offered them to other institutions. Merchants who had once supplied the college with materials and food demanded higher prices, factoring in the risk of dealing with mages who might have destroyed a city. The college found itself increasingly isolated, cut off from the broader magical community and viewed with hostility by the common folk. Some within the college argued for aggressive action to restore the institution's reputation. They wanted to launch public relations campaigns to demonstrate the college's value through dramatic displays of beneficial magic, to prove once and for all that the collapse had not been the college's fault. Others advocated for the opposite approach, suggesting that the college should withdraw even further from public life and focus entirely on research, accepting isolation as the price of pursuing knowledge. These debates sometimes grew heated, with different factions of mages pushing their preferred approaches and viewing compromise as betrayal. Archmage. Deneth walked a middle path, neither embracing isolation nor seeking to force the college back into Skyrim's good graces. He maintained that the college should continue its mission of magical education and research, but should do so with more caution and awareness of how its actions were perceived. He increased safety protocols for dangerous experiments, ensuring that nothing done in the college's laboratories could possibly affect the surrounding area. He encouraged students and masters to be helpful and respectful in their dealings with the people of Winterhold and other communities, understanding that every interaction shaped how magic and mages were viewed. He also worked to maintain connections with other magical institutions across Tamriel, ensuring that the college didn't become completely isolated from the broader magical community. The Great Collapse also prompted changes in the college's curriculum and research priorities. There was a renewed emphasis on understanding the fundamental forces of reality, particularly those relating to earth, stone, and stability. Alteration magic was studied with new intensity, as mages sought to develop spells that could predict geological instability or strengthen foundations. New branches of magical theory emerged, combining elements of alteration, mysticism, and even enchanting to create comprehensive approaches to architectural magic. Some of the spells and techniques developed in the wake of the collapse would prove valuable across Tamriel, used to protect cities from earthquakes and to stabilize mines and excavations. The psychological impact on those who had been present during the collapse shaped the college's culture for generations. Students who had helped pull survivors from rubble, who had seen entire families wiped out in moments, carried those memories for the rest of their lives. Some became obsessed with developing magic that could prevent similar disasters, devoting themselves to researching protective enchantments and early warning systems. Others grew more cautious in their magical studies, always aware that spells miscast or experiments gone wrong could have consequences far beyond the immediate area. A few left the college entirely, unable to continue studying magic in a place so associated with tragedy. As years passed, the Great Collapse became part of the college's mythology, a defining moment that was both mourned and analyzed. New students arrived knowing the story, understanding that they were studying in an institution that had survived catastrophe but remained scarred by it. The partially collapsed bridge became a symbol of the college's endurance, a narrow passage connecting the institution to the outside world that reminded all who crossed it that knowledge sometimes came at terrible cost. The ruins of old Winterhold, visible from the college's walls as tumbled, stone and broken foundations emerging from the water at low tide, served as a perpetual memorial to what had been lost. In the Fourth Era, more than 100 years after the collapse, the question of what truly caused the disaster remains unanswered. Some believe that time will eventually reveal the truth, that archaeological evidence or magical investigation will provide definitive proof one way or another. Others think the answer is lost forever, buried beneath the sea of ghosts along with most of the evidence. Perhaps it doesn't matter anymore. The Great Collapse happened, lives were lost, the city was destroyed, the college endured. These facts are undeniable, regardless of their cause. What matters now is how the college moves forward, carrying the weight of that history while continuing to pursue the magical knowledge that has always been its purpose. The college's political struggles. Throughout its long existence, the College of Winterhold has navigated a complex web of political relationships that often threatened its independence and occasionally jeopardized its very survival. These struggles emerge from a fundamental tension between the college's mission to pursue magical knowledge freely and the desires of various powers to control or limit such research. Kings and jarls wanted the college's magical resources at their disposal without granting mages autonomy. The people of Skyrim feared magic and those who wielded it, creating popular pressure to restrict or regulate the college's activities. Other magical organizations viewed the college sometimes as a rival to be surpassed, sometimes as a potential ally, but always as a power to be reckoned with. Understanding these political struggles requires examining the various factions and forces that have sought to influence the college over the centuries. The college's relationship with Skyrim's rulers has always been complicated by Nordic culture's deep-seated suspicion of magic. Unlike in Cyrodiil, where battle mages served openly in the legions and court wizards advised emperors, or in High Rock, where magic was woven into the fabric of society, Skyrim never fully embraced magical practice. The Nords respected the Thu'um, seeing it as a gift from their gods, but viewed traditional spellcasting as something foreign and potentially dangerous. This cultural prejudice meant that even when rulers recognized the practical value of having trained mages available, they hesitated to give the college too much freedom or power, fearing what might happen if mages became too numerous or influential. During the First Era, the college enjoyed a period of relative security thanks to the patronage of High King Harald and his successors. These early Nordic rulers understood that maintaining a strong kingdom required access to magical knowledge and trained mages. They provided funding for the college's expansion, granted legal protections that shielded mages from persecution, and even sent their own children to study at Winterhold in some cases. This golden age lasted for centuries, with the college and the crown existing in mutually beneficial partnership. The college trained mages for royal service, conducted research that benefited the kingdom, and helped defend Skyrim during times of war. In return, the rulers provided resources and protection from those who would see the college destroyed. This arrangement began to fray during the later First Era, as power in Skyrim became more decentralized. The strong central authority of the early Nordic Empire gave way to a patchwork of competing jarls, each ruling their own hold with varying degrees of autonomy. Some jarls maintained good relations with the college, recognizing its value. Others saw it as a threat or a competitor for influence. The college found itself having to negotiate separately with each hold's ruler, a time-consuming and frustrating process that diverted resources from research and education. Archmages spent increasing amounts of their time managing political relationships, traveling to whole capitals to meet with jarls and resolve disputes. The establishment of the Mages Guild in the early years of the Second Era represented both an opportunity and a threat to the college. The guild, founded by the Altmer mage Venus Galerian, sought to create a continent-wide organization of mages that would make magical services available to common people, while also regulating magical practice and maintaining ethical standards. The guild established chapter houses in cities across Tamriel, recruiting members and offering training in the basic schools of magic. For a time, it seemed that the Mages Guild might become the dominant magical institution in Tamriel, relegating ancient schools like the College of Winterhold to secondary status. The college's relationship with the Mages Guild was complex and often contentious. On one hand, both institutions shared the goal of advancing magical knowledge and making magic more accessible and accepted. Many mages held membership in both organizations, studying at the college while also joining the guild. The two institutions sometimes collaborated on research projects or shared resources when their interests aligned. Yet fundamental differences in philosophy and approach created tension. The Mages Guild emphasized practical magic and service to society, while the college prioritized pure research and theoretical advancement. The guild accepted all who wished to learn, while the college maintained selective admission standards. The guild operated under a clear hierarchy with centralized authority, while the college prized academic freedom and autonomy. These philosophical differences occasionally erupted into open conflict. The Mages Guild sometimes accused the college of being elitist and out of touch, hoarding knowledge that should be shared more broadly. The college countered, that the guild's lax standards led to poorly trained mages who gave magic a bad reputation through their failures. Competition for students and resources added material concerns to these ideological disputes. Both institutions sought funding from wealthy patrons and governmental bodies. Both recruited promising young mages, sometimes actively poaching talented individuals from one another. This competition intensified during periods when either institution faced financial difficulties or declining enrollment. The situation became particularly acute during the Third Era, when the Mages Guild's influence reached its peak. The Guild had chapter houses in nearly every major city in Tamriel and counted thousands of members. Its leadership in Cyrodiil wielded significant political influence, advising the Emperor and helping shape imperial policy regarding magic. The college, by contrast, remained isolated in northern Skyrim, its enrollment declining as more young mages chose the guild's more accessible training and clearer career paths. For a time, it seemed the college might become irrelevant, an ancient institution whose time had passed. The college's survival during this period owed much to its Archmages' skillful navigation of these challenges. Rather than trying to compete directly with the guild's model, they emphasized what made the college unique. The college possessed one of Tamriel's finest magical libraries, with texts that could be found nowhere else. Its remote location and independence from outside control made it an ideal place for controversial research that the guild couldn't or wouldn't support. Its ancient traditions and prestigious reputation attracted scholars who valued academic rigor over the guild's more practical focus. By carving out this distinct identity, the college maintained relevance even as the Mages Guild dominated mainstream magical practice. The dissolution of the Mages Guild in the late Third Era dramatically altered this dynamic. The guild's collapse, triggered by a combination of internal corruption and external pressures, left a void in Tamriel's magical community. Suddenly, the college found itself as one of the few remaining major magical institutions with any real stability. Mages who had previously dismissed the college as outdated now looked to Winterhold as one of the last bastions of serious magical study. Enrollment increased sharply as students who would have joined the guild instead sought training at the college. Scholars who had worked in guild chapter houses brought their research to Winterhold when those facilities closed. Yet this influx of former guild members also brought challenges. Many arrived with different expectations and approaches to magic than the college's traditional culture emphasized. Conflicts arose between old college traditionalists and newcomers pushing for changes based on guild practices. Some wanted the college to become more like the guild had been, offering practical magical services to communities across Skyrim and actively recruiting students from the general population. Others insisted that the college must maintain its distinctive identity and not simply become a guild replacement. These debates dominated college politics for decades, with different factions rising and falling as Archmages sympathetic to various positions were elected. The rise of the Synod and the College of Whispers as successor organizations to the Mages Guild created new political complications. Both groups claimed to represent the legitimate continuation of the Guild's mission, and both sought to recruit members and establish their authority over Tamriel's magical community. The Synod, based in Cyrodiil, emphasized rigorous study and advancement of magical theory, positioning itself as the more scholarly of the two organizations. The College of Whispers, with its headquarters in the same city, focused more on practical applications of magic and maintaining magical infrastructure. Both viewed the College of Winterhold as either a potential ally or a competitor, depending on circumstances. The college maintained careful neutrality in the Synod Whispers rivalry, refusing to formally affiliate with either organization while maintaining diplomatic relations with both. This position allowed the college to cooperate with both groups when beneficial, while avoiding being drawn into their conflicts. Students and scholars from both organizations visited Winterhold to study in the Arcaneum, and the college occasionally shared research findings with both groups. Yet the college's leadership was always aware that too close an association with either faction could compromise its independence or alienate the other, so they trod carefully in all dealings with these institutions. The Thalmor's growing influence in Skyrim during the Fourth Era presented perhaps the most serious political threat the college had faced in centuries. The Aldmeri Dominion, dominated by Ultima supremacists who viewed other races as inferior, took particular interest in Tamriel's magical institutions. The Thalmor sought to control or influence every significant center of magical learning, believing that magic should be guided by Ultima wisdom and used to advance their political agenda. They viewed the College of Winterhold with special interest, seeing it as both a repository of valuable knowledge and a potential tool for expanding their influence in Skyrim. Thalmor agents began visiting the college with increasing frequency after the White Gold Concordat ended the Great War. Ostensibly, they came as scholars seeking to study in the Arcaneum or observe the college's teaching methods. In reality, they were gathering intelligence, identifying which mages might be sympathetic to Thalmor ideology and which opposed it, and looking for opportunities to insert their influence into the college's operations. Some brought gifts of rare texts or artifacts, hoping to gain favor. Others offered to fund research projects or establish exchange programs with magical institutions in Alinor. All sought to gradually shift the college toward positions more aligned with Thalmor interests. The college's masters were divided on how to respond to this infiltration. Some argued for completely closing the college to Thalmor visitors, refusing to cooperate with an organization they viewed as fundamentally hostile to the college's values. Others counseled a more pragmatic approach, accepting Thalmor overtures while remaining vigilant against overt attempts at control. A few actually sympathized with Thalmor positions, particularly high elf mages, who felt some cultural connection to their homeland and believed that Ultima leadership of Tamriel's magical community might not be entirely bad. These divisions created internal tensions that occasionally paralyzed the college's ability to present a unified response to external pressures. Ancano, a Thalmor agent who gained a position as an advisor at the college in the early Fourth Era, represented the culmination of these infiltration efforts. His presence sparked fierce debates among the masters. Some viewed him as a spy who should be expelled immediately. Others argued that refusing to work with him would damage the college's reputation for being open to all scholars, regardless of political affiliations. Ancano himself was careful to present a scholarly facade, claiming interest only in magical research, while subtly working to advance Thalmor interests within the college. His actions during the events involving the Eye of Magnus would ultimately vindicate those who had warned against trusting him, but by then, significant damage had been done. The college's political struggles extended beyond these major conflicts to countless smaller disputes over the centuries. Local jarls periodically attempted to tax the college or regulate its activities, claims that were always resisted on grounds of the institution's ancient independence. Merchants in Winterhold and other cities sometimes organized boycotts to pressure the college on various issues. Religious organizations occasionally condemned certain types of magical research as heretical or dangerous, demanding the college cease such activities. Each of these conflicts had to be navigated carefully, with the college's leadership working to protect its independence and mission while avoiding unnecessarily antagonizing powerful interests. Through all these political storms, the college survived by maintaining several key principles. First, it insisted on its independence from any outside authority, refusing to become subordinate to any government, religious institution, or other magical organization. Second, it maintained the position that all mages, regardless of their race or political affiliations, were welcome to study at the college as long as they respected its rules and traditions. Third, it avoided taking official positions on political controversies, instead focusing on its mission of magical research and education. These principles were tested repeatedly, but ultimately proved flexible enough to allow the college to adapt to changing circumstances while preserving its essential character. The college's political struggles continue into the present day, with new challenges constantly emerging to test its resilience. The civil war that erupted in Skyrim in the Fourth Era forced the college to navigate between Imperial and Stormcloak factions, either of which might have seen value in controlling the institution. The ongoing tensions with the Thalmor require constant vigilance to prevent infiltration, while not appearing xenophobic or closed-minded. The residual distrust from the Great Collapse means that the college must work harder than other institutions to maintain public support. Yet through all these challenges, the college endures, its walls still standing against the northern winds, its mages still pursuing the knowledge that has always been its reason for existence. Famous scholars and discoveries. The history of the College of Winterhold is inseparable from the extraordinary individuals who have studied within its walls and the groundbreaking discoveries they have made. These scholars came from all corners of Tamriel, drawn by the promise of access to the Arcanium's vast collection and the opportunity to work alongside the finest magical minds of their generation. Some arrived as young students full of potential and left as masters who would reshape their fields of study. Others came already accomplished, seeking the freedom and resources necessary to pursue research that would be impossible elsewhere. Together, they built a legacy of achievement that transformed not just the college, but the entire practice of magic across Tamriel. One of the earliest scholars to achieve lasting fame was a Nord mage named Shalidor, who lived during the First Era and whose accomplishments remain legendary even in the Fourth Era. Shalidor came to the college as a young man already showing unusual talent, particularly in the School of Alteration. His understanding of how magic could manipulate the fundamental properties of reality surpassed that of his teachers, and he quickly advanced through the ranks to become a master while still in his 20s. Shalidor's contributions to magical theory were numerous, but his most significant work involved the creation of powerful enchantments that could reshape entire structures or landscapes. Shalidor is credited with designing and constructing Labyrinthian, the massive ruined structure that stands in the mountains of Yalmarch. According to legend, he built the entire complex in a single day, using magic so powerful that witnesses struggled to comprehend what they were seeing. Walls rose from the earth fully formed. Towers spiraled upward as if growing like plants. Corridors twisted into impossible configurations that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Whether this tale is literally true or exaggerated by time, Labyrinthian itself stands as testament to Shalidor's mastery of alteration magic. The structure incorporates enchantments and spatial manipulations that scholars still study thousands of years later, trying to understand the techniques he employed. Shalidor's most famous creation, however, was the artifact known as Shalidor's Maze or Shalidor's Mirror, a magical construct that exists in a pocket dimension, accessible only to those who possess the key. The maze serves as both a repository for dangerous knowledge and a test for mages who wish to prove their worth. Those who enter must navigate through challenges that test every school of magic, solving puzzles and overcoming obstacles that Shalidor designed to separate the truly skilled from the merely competent. Many have entered Shalidor's maze over the centuries. Not all have returned. Those who succeed emerge with knowledge and power that justifies the risks taken. Another legendary scholar was Sarthal's excavation team leader during the First Era, an Ultima mage named Atma, whose discovery of the Eye of Magnus would have ramifications lasting millennia. Atma led an expedition to explore the ruins of Sarthal, the first human city in Skyrim, which had been destroyed during the Snow Elf uprising known as the Night of Tears. Most scholars at the time assumed Sarthal held nothing more than historical interest, but Atma believed the elves' vicious assault on the city had been motivated by something more than simple territorial dispute. His instincts proved correct when his team uncovered a massive spherical artifact buried deep beneath the ruins. The Eye of Magnus, as it came to be called, radiated magical energy unlike anything previously encountered. Atma spent years studying the artifact, developing theories about its origin and purpose. He concluded that the eye was not created by mortals or even by the Aedra, but was instead a remnant from the very creation of Mundus itself, a fragment of pure magical potential left over from the Dawn era. His attempts to tap the eye's power led to several breakthrough discoveries in how magic could be channeled and stored, techniques that became fundamental to later developments in enchanting and spell design. Yet Atma also recognized the danger the eye represented, and he eventually recommended it be reburied and sealed, its location kept secret from all but the college's highest leadership. The Second Era saw the rise of Telvanni immigrants from Morrowind, who brought with them knowledge of spore magic, soul magic, and techniques for extending lifespan that were unknown in Skyrim. Among them was a dark elf named Neloth, who would later become one of the most accomplished enchanters in Tamriel's history. During his time at the college, relatively brief compared to his centuries-long life, Neloth developed new approaches to soul gem enchanting that allowed more efficient storage of magical energy. His work on soul trap spells and black soul gems, while ethically controversial, advanced the field significantly, and his techniques remain in use throughout the Fourth Era. The Third Era brought remarkable developments in restoration magic, largely due to the work of a Breton healer named Adele Montrose. She arrived at the college having already established herself as one of Tamriel's foremost healers, having served as court physician to several High Rock nobles. At Winterhold, Adele turned her attention to researching the theoretical foundations of healing magic, seeking to understand why restoration spells worked on a fundamental level. Her breakthrough came when she proved that restoration magic didn't simply accelerate the body's natural healing processes, but actually reinforced the spiritual connection between body and soul, temporarily making the target more resistant to damage and disease. This discovery led Adele to develop an entirely new category of restoration spells she called wards, protective enchantments that created shields of magical energy around their targets. Unlike earlier protective magic that relied on altering physical properties or summoning barriers from oblivion, wards worked by reinforcing the target's own magical defenses, making them particularly effective against other forms of magic. Adele's ward spells became essential tools for defensive magic, used by mages across Tamriel to protect themselves during combat or dangerous magical experiments. Her theoretical work also laid groundwork for later developments in magic resistance and spell absorption. The field of conjuration saw revolutionary advances during the late Third Era, thanks to the research of a wood elf mage named Finis Gestor. Gestor came to the college specifically to study under its masters of conjuration, having developed an obsession with understanding the nature of oblivion and the creatures that inhabited it. His early work focused on improving binding spells that controlled summoned Daedra, making them more reliable and allowing summoners to call forth more powerful entities without losing control. These practical improvements were valuable, but Gestor's true contribution came from his theoretical work on the relationship between Mundus and Oblivion. Gestor proposed that Oblivion was not simply another place, separate from Mundus, but rather an overlapping dimension that existed in a state of constant flux around and through the mortal world. He theorized that when mages summoned creatures from Oblivion, they weren't pulling them across vast distances, but rather tuning into the part of Oblivion that was already present at that location, manifesting creatures that existed in a perpetual state of near manifestation. This theory explained why summoning worked instantly, regardless of distance, and why different types of Daedra could be called forth at the same location. Though controversial and never definitively proven, Gestor's model of Oblivion became the dominant paradigm for understanding conjuration magic. Destruction magic advanced significantly during the Fourth Era through the work of a dark elf master named Feralda, who specialized in researching the fundamental nature of magical energy and how it could be shaped into offensive spells. Feralda's background included combat experience from her youth in Morrowind, giving her practical insight into what made destruction spells effective in real combat, rather than just in controlled testing environments. She focused on improving the efficiency of elemental spells, finding ways to generate more destructive power while consuming less magicka from the caster. Her breakthrough came through studying how different types of magical energy interacted with various materials and substances. She discovered that fire spells could be made more intense by incorporating subtle alterations to how the magical energy combusted, creating flames that burned hotter without requiring more magicka input. Her improvements to shock spells involved understanding how electrical energy could be channeled through air more efficiently by creating temporary pathways of ionized particles. Her frost spells used techniques that more effectively absorbed heat energy from targets, freezing them more thoroughly. These improvements made destruction magic significantly more effective, particularly for combat mages who needed to manage their magicka carefully during extended engagements. Illusion magic benefited from the research of Drevis Nalaran, a master illusionist who became fascinated by the question of how illusion spells actually affected minds and perceptions. Most mages treated illusion as a purely practical discipline, learning spells that could calm enemies, strike fear into opponents, or turn them invisible. Drevis wanted to understand the underlying mechanisms, how magic could alter what the mind perceived or felt. His research involved extensive work with volunteers, studying how different illusion spells affected people with varying levels of mental resistance and magical aptitude. Drevis discovered that illusion magic worked not by directly altering the brain or sensory organs, but by temporarily adjusting how the target's soul processed information from those sources. The soul, acting as the interface between body and consciousness, could be subtly influenced to misinterpret sensory data or generate emotional responses that didn't match the actual situation. This explained why illusion spells were less effective against creatures with unusual soul structures, such as undead or constructs, and why people with strong willpower could sometimes resist illusion effects through sheer determination. Understanding these mechanisms allowed Drevis to develop more targeted and effective illusion spells that worked by exploiting specific vulnerabilities in how souls processed information. The study of mysticism, that enigmatic school dealing with the manipulation of magical forces themselves, saw significant advances from multiple scholars working at different periods. An imperial mage named Gavros Plinius spent decades at the college during the Third Era researching spell absorption and reflection, magical techniques that could redirect hostile spells back toward their casters. His work built on earlier research, but took it to new levels, developing systematic approaches to identifying the magical signatures of different spell types and creating countermeasures specific to each. His treatise, On the Nature of Defensive Magic, became required reading for any serious student of mysticism. Later researchers expanded on Plinius's work to develop dispelling magic that could unravel existing enchantments and ongoing spell effects. A Breton mage named Thalmor, who would later become one of the college's most beloved masters, contributed significantly to this field. Thalmor developed a theoretical framework for understanding how spells maintained their integrity over time and what techniques could be used to disrupt that integrity. His dispelling spells could unravel everything from simple light enchantments to complex ward spells, making him invaluable during situations where dangerous magic needed to be neutralized quickly. The field of enchanting saw continuous innovation throughout the college's history, with each generation of enchanters building on the work of their predecessors. The creation of stable soul gems that could store magical energy without degrading over time was a breakthrough from the First Era, though no single mage can be credited with the discovery. During the Second Era, scholars learned to bind specific spell effects to items permanently, creating weapons that burned with fire, armor that resisted magic, and jewelry that enhanced the wearer's abilities. The Third Era brought refinements in efficiency, allowing enchanters to create more powerful effects while using smaller soul gems. Fourth Era research has focused on combining multiple enchantments on single items and developing techniques for recharging enchanted items more efficiently. One particularly notable enchanter was an orc named Sergius Turianus, who served as the college's chief enchanting instructor during the Fourth Era. Sergius came to enchanting through an unconventional path, having originally trained as a destruction mage before a magical accident damaged his ability to cast conventional combat spells. Unable to continue his previous specialization, he turned to enchanting as a way to continue contributing magically. His outsider perspective led him to question assumptions that other enchanters took for granted, resulting in several innovations in how enchantments could be layered and reinforced. The college's alchemical research, while perhaps less celebrated than the work in other fields, has been equally important to Tamriel's magical advancement. Generations of alchemists have studied how magical properties could be extracted from natural materials and combined to create potions, poisons, and other compounds. They developed systematic classifications of ingredients based on their magical properties, created techniques for preserving rare materials, and discovered countless combinations that produced useful effects. The Arcanium's collection of alchemical texts represents one of the most comprehensive repositories of such knowledge in Tamriel. These famous scholars and their discoveries represent only a fraction of the work accomplished at the college over its long history. Countless other mages made contributions that, while perhaps less dramatic, were nonetheless important to the advancement of magical knowledge. Some improved teaching methods, making complex concepts more accessible to students. Others documented magical phenomena, creating records that later researchers could build upon. Still others served as mentors, guiding talented students toward achievements that would surpass their own. The college's greatness lies not in any single achievement, but in the accumulated work of thousands of dedicated scholars across thousands of years, each adding their own piece to the grand edifice of magical understanding. The Eye of Magnus Mystery. Among all the artifacts, relics, and magical objects that have passed through the College of Winterhold over its long history, none has generated as much fascination, controversy, and danger as the artifact known as the Eye of Magnus. This mysterious spherical object, radiating power beyond conventional understanding, represents one of the greatest enigmas in Tamrielic history. Its origins remain uncertain despite extensive research. Its purpose is unknown despite countless theories. Its power is undeniable despite being largely untapped. The Eye's story intertwines with the college's history in ways that illuminate both the institution's greatest achievements and its most serious failures, demonstrating how the pursuit of knowledge can lead to both enlightenment and catastrophe. The Eye of Magnus was first discovered in the ruins of Sarthal, the ancient Nordic city that served as humanity's first major settlement in Skyrim. Sarthal's history is itself shrouded in tragedy and mystery. Founded during the late Merethic era by Isgramor and his followers, the city thrived for a time before being destroyed during the Night of Tears, a snow elf uprising that massacred most of the city's population and drove the survivors back to Atmora. Conventional history attributes this attack to territorial disputes and the elves' desire to prevent human expansion in Skyrim. However, some scholars have long suspected that the snow elves' violence was motivated by something more specific, that they had discovered something in or beneath Sarthal that they found threatening enough to justify attempted genocide. This theory gained credibility during the First Era, when college mages conducting archaeological research at Sarthal uncovered the eye buried deep beneath the ruins. The artifact was found in a sealed chamber that showed evidence of both Nordic and Elven construction, suggesting that both races had known about the eye and had worked, perhaps separately, to contain or study it. The chamber's enchantments had preserved the eye perfectly, despite the passage of centuries, and when the excavation team first broke through, they found it hovering in the center of the room, rotating slowly and emanating a soft blue-white light. The lead archaeologist, Atma, immediately recognized that they had found something extraordinary. The magical energy radiating from the eye was unlike anything he had encountered in decades of magical study. It wasn't aligned with any particular school of magic, but seemed to encompass all of them simultaneously. Destruction, restoration, alteration, every form of magic he tested for showed presence in the eye's emanations, as though it were a source of undifferentiated magical potential rather than power shaped for any specific purpose. More remarkably, the intensity of the magical radiation didn't seem to diminish with distance the way normal magical effects did, suggesting that the eye might be generating power continuously rather than simply storing a finite reserve. Atmar's initial report to the college described the eye as possibly being a fragment of creation itself, magic in its purest form, undifferentiated and unlimited. He theorized that the artifact might date back to the Dawn era, that chaotic period at the beginning of linear time when the structure of reality was still being established. Perhaps the Eye was a leftover from the creation of Mundus, a piece of the divine machinery that the Aedra had used to build the mortal world. Or perhaps it was even older, a fragment of the dream of Anu, the primordial force that preceded all existence. Such theories were inherently unprovable, but the Eye's properties seemed to defy any more mundane explanation. The decision of what to do with the Eye sparked intense debate within the college. Some masters argued for intensive study, believing that unlocking the artifact's secrets could revolutionize magic and give the college unprecedented power and prestige. They pointed out that opportunities like this came perhaps once in a millennium, and the college had an obligation to its mission of advancing magical knowledge to pursue every possible avenue of research. Others urged extreme caution, noting that the Eye's power was clearly beyond current understanding, and that attempting to manipulate it could have catastrophic consequences. They referenced the old maxim that magic one didn't understand was indistinguishable from suicide, and argued that the Eye should be studied only through observation and analysis, never through direct manipulation. The compromise position that ultimately prevailed was to bring the Eye to the college for study, but to implement strict safety protocols and limits on experimentation. The artifact would be housed in a specially constructed chamber beneath the Hall of Attainment, sealed with multiple layers of protective wards and accessible only to authorized researchers. All experiments would be carefully planned and approved by a committee of senior masters. Any sign of instability or unexpected behavior would result in immediate cessation of research. These rules were designed to allow for productive study while minimizing the risk of disaster. For several decades, this approach worked well. Researchers studying the Eye made numerous discoveries about its properties and behavior. They determined that its magical radiation varied in intensity according to celestial alignments, growing stronger during certain phases of the moons and during specific astronomical configurations. They found that while the Eye couldn't be moved by conventional physical means, it would respond to certain magical influences, rotating or shifting position when exposed to particularly powerful spells. Most intriguingly, they discovered that gazing into the Eye's depths for extended periods induced a trance state where the viewer experienced visions of impossible geometries and heard whispers in languages that might have been older than speech itself. These discoveries led to theoretical advances in understanding the nature of magic and reality. Some researchers proposed that the Eye might be a window into Etherius, the realm of pure magic, from which all magical energy in Mundus ultimately flows. Others suggested it might be connected to the heart of Lorcan, another artifact of tremendous power that had shaped Tamriel's history. A few radicals even theorized that the Eye might not be an artifact at all, but rather a living entity, a consciousness so alien that mortal minds could barely comprehend it as alive. None of these theories could be proven definitively, but they stimulated productive debate and research that expanded understanding even if the Eye itself remained mysterious. The research protocols eventually broke down due to a combination of ambition, arrogance, and external pressure. By the later years of the Third Era, the college faced competition from the Mages Guild and declining prestige. Some masters believed that a dramatic breakthrough using the Eye could restore the college's reputation and attract students and funding. They began pushing for more aggressive research, arguing that the cautious approach had yielded diminishing returns and that real progress required taking risks. Younger researchers, impatient with what they saw as the timidity of their elders, sometimes conducted unauthorized experiments when they could gain access to the chamber. One such unauthorized experiment ended in disaster. A group of advanced students managed to bypass the Eye's security systems and attempted to draw power from the artifact for use in an ambitious enchanting project. Their lack of preparation and understanding became immediately apparent when the Eye's response exceeded anything they could control. The chamber filled with blinding light and discharged magical energy. 2 of the students died instantly, their bodies literally torn apart by the raw power they had tried to channel. The others survived, but suffered permanent magical scarring, their ability to cast spells crippled by the backlash. The chamber itself had to be abandoned and sealed, its structure so infused with residual magic that it became dangerous to enter. Following this disaster, the college's leadership made the difficult decision to reseal the Eye at Thalmor, rather than keep it at Winterhold. The artifact was transported back to its original location with great difficulty, as it resisted any attempt to contain or control its movement. Eventually, a combination of powerful alteration spells and carefully crafted enchantments succeeded in returning the Eye to its underground chamber. The entrance was sealed with wards that would warn the college if anyone attempted to access it, but otherwise the Eye was left undisturbed, its mysteries once again hidden beneath Skyrim's frozen earth. For centuries, the Eye remained buried and largely forgotten except in the college's most secret records. The disaster that had prompted its resealing was not publicized, and over time, knowledge of the Eye's existence faded from common awareness, even within the college. Students studied in facilities built directly above the artifact's resting place without knowing what lay beneath their feet. New generations of masters learned about the Eye only if they attained high enough rank to access the restricted sections of the Arcanium, where accounts of its discovery were preserved. This secrecy was intentional, designed to prevent another attempt to study the Eye ending in disaster. The Eye's story took a dramatic turn in the Fourth Era, when circumstances forced its rediscovery. An expedition to Thalmor led by College mages uncovered the sealed chamber, initially believing they had found merely another section of the ancient ruins. When they broke through the seals, however, they found the Eye exactly as it had been left centuries before, still hovering and radiating power, unchanged by the passage of time. Word of the discovery spread quickly through the college, and once again, debates erupted about what should be done with the artifact. This time, however, the college faced external pressure that complicated any decision. Thalmor agents who had infiltrated the institution learned of the Eye's discovery and immediately took interest. Led by a mage named Ancano, they began pushing for the Eye to be brought to the college for study, ostensibly so that its secrets could be unlocked for the benefit of all, but more realistically, because they wanted access to its power for their own purposes. The Psijic Order, an ancient and mysterious magical organization based on the island of Artaeum, also intervened, sending representatives who warned that the Eye represented a danger that the college did not understand, and that it should be left sealed. The conflict over the Eye reached its climax when Ancano, defying college protocol and common sense, attempted to tap the artifact's power for himself. His actions triggered a magical catastrophe that threatened not just the college, but potentially all of Skyrim. The Eye began discharging energy in vast quantities, creating a barrier that sealed off the college from the outside world and causing reality itself to become unstable within the affected area. Time flowed inconsistently, spatial relationships became distorted, and magical effects manifested randomly as the fundamental laws of nature buckled under the strain. Only through the intervention of the Psijic Order and a newly recognized Dragonborn was the crisis resolved, with the Eye finally being transported away to Artaeum, where the Psijics believed they could study and contain it safely. The Eye of Magnus Mystery endures despite all the research and crises associated with it. Its origin remains unknown, though theories proliferate. Its purpose, if it has one, is undiscoverable. The question of whether it is an artifact created by someone or something, a natural phenomenon, or even a living entity cannot be answered with current knowledge. What is certain is that it represents power beyond conventional understanding and danger to match. The college's experience with the Eye demonstrates both the heights and perils of magical research, how the pursuit of knowledge can lead to genuine breakthroughs, but can also bring catastrophe when caution is abandoned in favor of ambition. The lessons learned from the Eye have shaped the college's approach to dangerous magical research in lasting ways. Protocols for studying powerful artifacts were strengthened and formalized, with multiple layers of approval required before any potentially hazardous experimentation. The importance of sharing knowledge rather than hoarding it was reinforced, as secrecy about the Eye's dangers had contributed to later disasters. Perhaps most importantly, the college developed a more humble understanding of magic itself, accepting that there were forces and phenomena that might be beyond mortal comprehension, at least with current understanding. Some mysteries might need to remain mysteries, not because seeking answers is wrong, but because the risks of doing so might outweigh any possible benefit. The Eye of Magnus stands as a reminder that magic, for all its power and utility, connects to forces and realms that exceed human understanding. It represents the ultimate enigma, a question that cannot be answered, a power that cannot be controlled, a mystery that resists all attempts to penetrate it. Whether future generations of mages will succeed where their predecessors failed, finally unlocking the Eye's secrets, or whether it will remain forever incomprehensible, only time will tell. For now, it rests in the care of the Psijic Order, those enigmatic masters whose own knowledge and capabilities exceed those of the conventional mages. Perhaps they will succeed where the college failed, or perhaps they too will eventually conclude that some knowledge is meant to remain hidden, some questions unanswered, some mysteries preserved inviolate against the curiosity that drives all who seek to understand the magical forces that shape the world. Daily life and magical disciplines. Behind the grand history and dramatic events that define the College of Winterhold lies the everyday reality of life within its walls, the routine experiences that shape students and masters alike as they pursue magical knowledge. Understanding this daily life reveals much about what it truly means to study at one of Tamriel's most prestigious magical institutions, from the mundane challenges of staying warm in Skyrim's brutal climate to the intellectual excitement of mastering spells that can reshape reality. The college operates as a small, self-contained community where the rhythms of study, practice, and discovery create patterns that have remained remarkably consistent across the centuries, despite all the external changes and crises the institution has weathered. A typical day at the college begins before dawn, when the first students emerge from their dormitories and make their way to the Hall of Elements for the morning assembly. This tradition, established during the college's earliest years, serves both practical and social functions. The masters use the assembly to make announcements about upcoming events, policy changes, or opportunities for advanced study. Students learn about new books that have arrived in the Arcanium, guest lectures being offered, or dangerous magical phenomena that have been detected nearby and should be avoided. Beyond these practical matters, the assembly reinforces the sense of community that binds the college together, reminding all present that they are part of something larger than their individual studies. Following the assembly, students disperse to their various activities according to schedules that vary based on their level of advancement and chosen specializations. Novices, those newest to the college, typically spend their mornings in classroom instruction, receiving formal teaching in magical theory and basic spell-casting techniques. These classes cover the fundamental principles that underlie all magic, concepts about the flow of magicka through living beings, the relationship between the physical and spiritual realms, and the mental disciplines required to shape magical energy into specific effects. The instruction can be dry and theoretical, covering material that students often find tedious, but masters emphasize that understanding these basics is essential for safe and effective magical practice. Classroom time alternates with practical training sessions where students attempt to cast the spells they have been learning about. These sessions take place in specially designated practice areas, typically in the courtyard when weather permits, or in warded chambers within the college's buildings during Skyrim's harsh winter months. Destruction students hurl firebolts at stone targets, learning to control the intensity and accuracy of their spells. Restoration practitioners work in pairs, taking turns inflicting minor injuries and then healing them, developing the ability to channel healing energy efficiently. Alteration students attempt progressively more difficult transformations, starting with simple cantrip effects like making object glow and advancing toward more complex manipulations of matter and energy. More advanced students, those who have progressed beyond the novice stage, enjoy greater freedom in how they structure their days. They may still attend some formal classes, particularly when masters are teaching specialized topics, but much of their learning occurs through independent study and research. These students spend long hours in the Arcanium, poring over ancient texts and modern research, seeking answers to questions that have arisen in their practice or pursuing topics that have captured their interest. The library becomes their second home, its shelves as familiar as the corridors of their dormitories, its collection of knowledge an endless source of discovery and inspiration. The Arcanium itself deserves special attention, as it stands as the heart of the college's intellectual life. The Great Library occupies multiple levels, with the main reading room featuring high ceilings supported by pillars carved with protective runes. Shelves line every wall and create aisles through the space, filled with books, scrolls, and loose manuscripts covering every aspect of magical theory and practice. Some volumes are ancient, their pages yellow with age, and their bindings cracked from centuries of use. Others are recent acquisitions, their pages still crisp and their ink fresh. The collection encompasses works on all schools of magic, historical accounts of magical events and discoveries, philosophical treatises on the nature of reality and consciousness, and countless practical manuals offering instruction in specific techniques. Urag Gro Shub, an Archmage who serves as the Arcanium's librarian during the Fourth Era, exemplifies the dedication required to maintain such a collection. He knows the location and content of virtually every book under his care, can direct researchers to relevant sources for almost any inquiry, and guards the collection with a fierce protectiveness that sometimes borders on hostility. His gruff demeanor and suspicious nature toward those who wish to borrow books stems from genuine concern for preserving irreplaceable texts and from painful experience with students who have damaged or lost volumes through carelessness. Despite his prickly personality, Urag is invaluable to the college's research efforts, and experienced scholars know to treat him with respect and deference. The practical study of magic at the college follows structures that divide the discipline into distinct schools based on the nature of the effects produced. This classification system, established during the institution's early years, has proven remarkably durable, providing a framework that helps students understand the vast range of magical possibilities and focus their studies productively. Each school has its own theoretical foundations, specialized techniques, and particular challenges that students must master. Destruction magic, the art of channeling magical energy into offensive effects, attracts students drawn to magic's power and dramatic results. The school encompasses elemental spells that produce fire, frost, and shock effects, each with different properties and applications. Fire spells deal immediate damage through burning, proving most effective against enemies vulnerable to heat. Frost spells drain stamina and slow targets, making them valuable for controlling opponents' movements. Shock spells damage magicka reserves and can stun targets, particularly useful against other mages. Students learn not just how to cast these spells, but how to modulate their power, choosing between weaker spells that consume less magicka and can be cast frequently, and powerful spells that require significant energy but deal devastating damage. Restoration magic focuses on healing and protection, using magical energy to mend injuries, cure diseases, and shield against harm. Beginning students learn simple healing spells that can close wounds and restore vitality, effects that require careful control to channel magic in ways that promote natural healing rather than forcing tissue to regenerate too quickly. More advanced restoration techniques include spells that cure diseases by purging foreign influences from the body, turn undead creatures by channeling positive energy that is anathema to them, and create wards that shield against magical attacks. The school also includes sun magic, powerful spells that channel the pure light of Magnus to destroy undead and Daedra, though these techniques require significant skill and strength to master. Alteration magic manipulates the fundamental properties of matter and energy, allowing mages to change what things are or how they behave. The school's versatility makes it valuable for countless applications beyond combat. Alteration spells can increase the density of armor and skin to provide physical protection, allow passage through solid objects, transmute materials from one form to another, and manipulate light to create illumination or darkness. More advanced practitioners can levitate, walk on water, breathe underwater, or even slow the passage of time in limited areas. The theoretical foundation of alteration magic is complex, requiring deep understanding of how reality is structured and what aspects can be safely modified without causing catastrophic instability. Illusion magic affects minds and perceptions, creating effects that are no less real to the targets for being based on mental manipulation rather than physical change. Illusionists can calm aggressive creatures, causing them to lose interest in combat. They can drive enemies into frenzied rage, turning them against their allies. They can inspire courage in frightened allies or terror in confident foes. Invisibility spells, perhaps the most iconic illusion magic, work by causing others to overlook the caster, not through physical transparency, but through mental suggestion that there is nothing worth noticing in that location. Mastering illusion requires not just magical skill, but psychological insight, understanding how different minds work and what triggers will be most effective. Conjuration magic summons creatures and objects from oblivion, creating temporary minions that fight for the caster or useful items that serve immediate needs. Beginning students learn to summon weak creatures like flame atronachs or minor daedra that pose little danger even if control is lost. Advanced conjurers can call forth powerful beings like Dremora lords or ancient spirits, though doing so requires powerful binding magic to ensure these entities serve rather than attack. The school also includes necromancy, the animation of corpses and the binding of souls, techniques that raise significant ethical concerns and are restricted or banned in many jurisdictions. Students studying conjuration must master not just summoning, but also banishment, the ability to dismiss summoned creatures safely. Mysticism, the most theoretical and least understood of the major schools, deals with the manipulation of magical forces themselves rather than using magic to affect the physical world. Mystics learn to detect magic, identifying enchantments and spell effects that would otherwise be invisible. They master dispelling magic, techniques for unraveling other mages' spells. They develop the ability to absorb incoming spells, converting hostile magic into magicka for their own use. They learn telekinesis, moving objects through magical force, and soul trapping, binding departed spirits into gems where their energy can power enchantments. The school requires deep understanding of magic's fundamental nature and tends to attract students with strong theoretical interests. Enchanting, while sometimes considered a practical art distinct from traditional spellcasting, remains a crucial discipline taught at the college. Enchanters learn to bind magical effects to physical objects permanently, creating weapons that never dull, armor that protects against spells, and jewelry that enhances the wearer's abilities. The process requires a combination of magical skill, technical knowledge, and artistic sensibility. Students must learn which materials accept enchantments most readily, how to prepare items to receive magical energies, how to draw power from filled soul gems, and how to stabilize enchantments so they persist indefinitely. The college maintains several enchanting facilities where students can practice under supervision, learning through hands-on experience how to create the enchanted items that are so valuable throughout Tamriel. Meals at the college provide respite from intensive study and opportunities for social interaction. The dining hall serves breakfast, lunch, and dinner at regular times, with food prepared by staff who work to provide adequate nutrition despite Winterhold's remote location and harsh climate. The menu relies heavily on preserved foods, dried meats, and hardy vegetables that can survive long storage, supplemented by whatever fresh provisions can be obtained from hunting or trade with nearby communities. Students and masters eat together without strict separation by rank, creating opportunities for informal mentorship and discussion that often prove as valuable as formal instruction. Evening time at the college varies depending on individual preferences and research needs. Some students continue their studies late into the night, working in the Arcanium until the librarian finally closes the facility, or practicing spells in their dormitories until exhaustion forces sleep. Others seek relaxation, gathering in common areas to talk with friends, play games, or simply rest after long days of intensive mental work. The college maintains several recreational spaces, including a modest library of non-magical texts, a music room with several instruments, and various games ranging from simple dice to complex strategy boards. These amenities recognize that students need mental breaks to remain healthy and effective in their studies. The social environment at the college brings together individuals from diverse backgrounds and creates opportunities for both friendship and conflict. Students from different provinces of Tamriel arrive with varying cultural assumptions and attitudes toward magic, leading to misunderstandings and disagreements that must be navigated carefully. Nords suspicious of magic may clash with Altmer, who view it as central to civilization. Imperials accustomed to structured magical training through the Mages Guild may find the college's more independent approach frustrating. Dunmer, bringing traditions from Morrowind's Telvanni wizards, may seem arrogant to others, yet these differences also enrich the community, exposing students to perspectives they would never encounter in their homelands and forcing them to question assumptions they had previously taken for granted. Romantic relationships develop among students despite, or perhaps because of, the college's isolated location and the intense shared experiences of magical study. The masters generally maintain a hands-off attitude towards students' personal lives, intervening only if relationships interfere with studies or create situations that threaten the college's stability. Some relationships prove fleeting, products of proximity and youth that fade when circumstances change. Others develop into lasting partnerships, with couples who met as students at the college going on to work together as researchers, or establishing magical practices in other parts of Tamriel. The progression from student to master represents the culmination of years of dedicated study and practice. Those seeking to advance must demonstrate not just mastery of spellcasting, but significant understanding of magical theory and original contributions to their field. The master's examination typically requires candidates to present research they have conducted, often involving the development of a new spell or significant theoretical advancement. A committee of current masters evaluates the work, asking probing questions designed to test the candidate's depth of understanding. Those who pass receive formal recognition as masters of their chosen school and may be invited to remain at the college as instructors, though many choose to pursue careers elsewhere using the prestige and knowledge gained from their Winterhold education. Life at the College of Winterhold demands dedication, discipline, and genuine passion for magical study. The remote location means isolation from the distractions and comforts available in more populated areas. The rigorous curriculum challenges even talented students, requiring long hours of study and practice. The harsh climate tests physical endurance, particularly for those from warmer regions, unused to Skyrim's bitter winters. Yet for those truly committed to understanding magic in all its complexity, the college offers opportunities available nowhere else in Tamriel. The chance to study under the finest masters, access to the Arcaneum's unparalleled collection, and the freedom to pursue research according to one's own interests make the sacrifices worthwhile for generations of students who have passed through the college's gates. Dark secrets and forbidden magic. Beneath the College of Winterhold's reputation as a center of legitimate magical learning lies a darker layer of history involving forbidden experiments, dangerous artifacts, and research that tested or exceeded ethical boundaries. These shadows are not merely sensational stories, but reflect genuine struggles within the magical community regarding what types of knowledge should be pursued and what powers should remain untouched. The college's complex relationship with forbidden magic reveals much about how institutions balance the pursuit of understanding against the responsibility to prevent knowledge from causing harm. Every major magical organization in Tamriel has similar secrets, but the college's long history and comprehensive archives make its dark legacy particularly extensive and well documented, for those with clearance to access the most restricted records. The most physically prominent manifestation of these darker aspects is the midden, a vast network of tunnels and chambers extending deep beneath the college's main buildings, originally excavated during the First Era as storage space for dangerous artifacts and practice areas for risky experiments. The midden has expanded over the centuries into a labyrinthine complex that few fully understand. The oldest sections date back to the college's founding, their construction incorporating both Nordic stonework and magical reinforcement designed to contain whatever forces might be unleashed within. Later additions created deeper levels, pushing ever further into the earth as successive generations of mages needed secure locations for increasingly dangerous work. The midden's atmosphere differs markedly from the college proper. Where the upper levels feature architectural beauty and careful maintenance, the tunnels below are crude and functional, carved through solid rock with magic and manual labor in equal measure. Moisture seeps through the stone, creating patches of slick ice in the colder sections. Magical lighting is sporadic, with long stretches of darkness between illuminated areas. The air carries scents of old magic, ozone from electrical discharges, sulfur from alchemical experiments, and the musty odor of ancient parchment and decay. Sounds echo strangely in the confined spaces, making it difficult to determine the source or distance of noises. The upper levels of the midden serve mundane purposes, housing storage rooms for excess books and equipment that cannot fit in the college proper. These areas remain relatively safe, though students are warned to avoid wandering without purpose, as it is easy to become lost in the maze of similar-looking corridors. Several practice chambers exist here where students can attempt dangerous spells without risking damage to the college's main facilities. The chambers feature reinforced walls and ceilings covered with protective wards designed to contain magical backlash from failed experiments. Scorch marks, frost patches, and other evidence of magical mishaps decorate these spaces despite regular cleaning, testifying to the hazards of magical education. Deeper in the midden lie the vaults and laboratories where truly dangerous materials are kept. Access to these areas is strictly controlled, with physical barriers reinforced by magical wards that recognize only authorized individuals. The security measures exist for good reason. The vaults contain artifacts too dangerous to display or use, but too valuable or too difficult to destroy to simply discard. Cursed items that drain the life from anyone who touches them. Weapons that have driven their wielders mad. Books whose contents are poisonous to read, literally damaging the minds of those who study them. These objects are catalogued, stored in isolated chambers behind multiple layers of protection, and visited only when absolutely necessary. Some of the midden's chambers serve as tombs for failed experiments, spaces sealed after catastrophic accidents killed the researchers involved. These rooms remain locked, not because anyone fears the experiments will resume, but because the lingering magical contamination makes them too dangerous to enter safely. Areas affected by necrotic magic resist restoration spells and drain life energy from living beings. Spaces where conjuration experiments went wrong remain partially connected to oblivion, creating unstable areas where reality behaves unpredictably. Chambers where alteration magic ran wild have physical properties that defy normal laws, with gravity pulling in wrong directions or time flowing at different rates than in the surrounding tunnels. The midden also houses the Atronach Forge, one of the college's most closely guarded secrets. This ancient device, whose origins predate the college itself, allows users to create Daedric items and summon powerful Atronachs through complex rituals. The forge appears to be a simple stone basin, surrounded by ritual circles, but it connects to deep powers in ways that few fully understand. Using the forge requires specific components and knowledge of proper procedures, making it accessible only to advanced practitioners who have learned the necessary techniques through years of study. The college carefully controls access to the forge, recognizing both its potential utility and the danger it represents if misused. Among the most controversial aspects of the college's dark history is its relationship with necromancy, the magical practice of animating corpses and binding souls. Necromancy occupies a complex ethical space in Tamrielic society. Many cultures view it as an abomination that violates the sanctity of death and the rights of the deceased. Others see it as simply another application of conjuration magic, no more inherently evil than summoning Daedra. The college's official position has shifted over the centuries depending on the views of current leadership and the political climate in Skyrim. But necromantic research has never ceased entirely, even during periods when it was officially forbidden. The arguments for studying necromancy emphasize its potential benefits and the importance of understanding all forms of magic. Necromantic techniques have applications beyond creating undead servants. Understanding how souls bind to bodies informs healing magic and research into consciousness. Studying the reanimation process provides insights into the nature of death itself and the transition between life and the afterlife. Some scholars argue that preventing research into necromancy leaves gaps in magical understanding that could prove dangerous, that ignorance is never preferable to knowledge even when that knowledge relates to uncomfortable subjects. They point out that many effective countermeasures against hostile necromancers have come from researchers who understood the techniques they were defending against. Opponents counter that necromancy inherently involves violation of the dead, using their remains as tools without consent and potentially trapping their souls in a form of slavery. They argue that the practice corrupts those who engage in it, gradually eroding ethical boundaries until practitioners view other beings merely as resources to be exploited. The historical record supports these concerns. Many prominent necromancers have descended into darkness, their research evolving from academic interest into active cruelty as they lost connection to normal morality. The bodies used in necromantic experiments must come from somewhere, and while some researchers use only corpses obtained legitimately through donation or legal channels, others have resorted to grave robbing or even murder to obtain fresh specimens. The college has attempted to navigate these controversies through compromise positions that satisfy no one fully, but prevent the issue from tearing the institution apart. Necromantic research is permitted but heavily regulated, with practitioners required to document the source of any remains they use and demonstrate that proper consent was obtained or that the remains were legally acquired. Research must be approved by committee before proceeding, and researchers must submit to regular reviews, ensuring they maintain ethical standards. These regulations reduce the most egregious abuses while allowing research to continue under supervision. Though critics argue they legitimize practices that should be banned entirely, while supporters complain they impose unnecessary restrictions on legitimate scholarship. Several specific incidents from the college's history illustrate the dangers of pushing magical research too far. During the Second Era, a master of conjuration named Ranith attempted to open a permanent portal to oblivion, believing such access would revolutionize the study of Daedra and potentially allow the college to establish formal diplomatic relations with the princes of that realm. his experiment succeeded too well, creating a stable gateway through which increasingly powerful Daedra began to emerge. What started as a controlled summoning of minor entities quickly escalated as the portal expanded and stronger beings forced their way through. Multiple masters died fighting to contain the breach before a combination of powerful banishment spells and the complete destruction of Ranith's laboratory finally sealed the gateway. The incident led to new restrictions on conjuration research and reinforced the principle that some knowledge is too dangerous to pursue. A third-era incident involved experimental soul magic that went horrifically wrong. A researcher named Malin Varen, obsessed with achieving immortality, developed a technique for transferring his soul into an enchanted object that could survive his body's death. He chose an empty Azura's star, a Daedric artifact capable of serving as a reusable soul gem, as his vessel. The transfer process went catastrophically wrong, trapping Varen's consciousness in a fractured state where he existed, but could not properly perceive or interact with the world. His confused, maddened spirit remained trapped in the artifact, attacking anyone who attempted to use it. Varen's research was sealed, and the artifact itself was removed from the college. But the incident demonstrated the profound dangers of tampering with the soul. The college has also been home to researchers who pushed boundaries in ways that, while successful, raised troubling questions. One fourth-era master developed enhancement spells that dramatically increased physical capabilities, but with severe long-term cost to the recipient's health and sanity. Another created illusionary techniques so powerful they could rewrite memories, potentially useful for therapy, but obviously dangerous if misused. A researcher studying alteration magic developed spells that could transmute living flesh, raising horrifying possibilities for torture or body manipulation. These developments were not catastrophic failures, but successful breakthroughs that forced difficult conversations about whether all knowledge that could be gained should be pursued. The college maintains ethical guidelines meant to prevent research from crossing into areas society deems unacceptable. Experiments on unwilling subjects are absolutely forbidden. Research that risks releasing uncontrollable forces must be approved by multiple committees and conducted with extensive safety measures. Certain topics, varying over time, but generally including research into creating new diseases, developing magic specifically designed for torture, or attempting to contact or summon beings whose power might exceed ability to control, are banned outright. These rules reflect hard-won wisdom from past disasters, though they remain controversial among those who believe any restriction on research represents unacceptable limitation on the pursuit of knowledge. The psychological toll of pursuing dangerous knowledge affects many researchers who delve too deeply into the darker aspects of magic. Students who initially approach forbidden subjects with pure academic curiosity sometimes find themselves changed by prolonged exposure to forces and concepts that strain mortal comprehension. Those who study Daedric texts report experiencing intrusive thoughts and compulsions that persist even after they stop reading. Researchers investigating necromancy describe becoming desensitized to death and suffering, viewing corpses as mere objects rather than remains of people who once lived. Some develop paranoia, believing that the forces they study are watching or attempting to influence them. The college provides counseling and support for those affected, but not all seek or accept help before damage becomes permanent. The Midden's deepest levels, those accessible only to the Archmage and a few trusted masters, allegedly contain the college's most dangerous secrets. Stories passed among students speak of a chamber where artifacts from before the Dawn era are stored. objects whose properties are so alien to normal reality that even viewing them risks madness. Another tale describes a laboratory where research into time manipulation continues despite official prohibitions, with researchers attempting to perfect spells that could rewrite history itself. Some whisper of a vault containing the true names of Daedric princes, knowledge that would grant power over those entities, but whose possession invites their wrath. Whether these stories contain truth, exaggeration, or complete fabrication remains known only to those with access to the deepest archives and most restricted areas. The relationship between forbidden knowledge and institutional responsibility remains one of the college's ongoing challenges. Complete prohibition of dangerous research risks leaving the magical community unprepared to counter threats that inevitably emerge, as those with fewer scruples have no such hesitation about pursuing power regardless of ethics. Yet permitting such research creates the possibility that the college itself becomes a source of threats, that experiments meant to protect against dangers instead create them. This tension has no perfect resolution, only ongoing negotiation as each generation of mages weighs the competing values of knowledge, safety, freedom, and responsibility. The Midden stands as physical testament to this complexity, a necessary evil beneath the college's proud towers. Its chambers hold both the fruits of successful research and the consequences of failures, preserved as warnings and resources in equal measure. Students sometimes joke darkly about taking the long walk, a euphemism for descending into the Midden's depths for research purposes, acknowledging both the value and the danger of engaging with the darker aspects of magical study. For all its horrors, the Midden serves an essential purpose, providing controlled space where dangerous questions can be investigated under supervision, rather than forcing such research into complete secrecy where no oversight exists. The college accepts this necessity while never forgetting the costs that come with it, maintaining vigilance against the day when curiosity or ambition overwhelms caution, and something sealed in those dark tunnels escapes to threaten all that has been built above. The Synod and Thalmor influence. The Fourth Era brought new political challenges to the College of Winterhold, as two powerful organizations sought to extend their influence over magical institutions throughout Tamriel. The Synod and the College of Whispers, rival successors to the defunct Mages Guild, competed for dominance over the magical community, while the Thalmor, the supremacist faction controlling the Aldmeri Dominion, pursued their own agenda of consolidating magical knowledge and power under Altmer control. The College of Winterhold found itself positioned at the intersection of these competing interests, forced to navigate complex political waters while attempting to maintain the independence and focus on research that had always defined the institution. Understanding these pressures requires examining each organization's goals and methods, as well as the strategies the college employed to resist co-optation, while maintaining productive relationships where possible. The Synod emerged in the wake of the Mages Guild's collapse, founded by former guild members who believed the organization's failure stemmed from insufficient intellectual rigor and poor leadership. They envisioned a more academically focused organization that would advance magical theory through systematic research and strict standards for membership and advancement. The Synod established its headquarters in Cyrodiil and began recruiting mages across the Empire, offering structured advancement paths and access to research facilities for those who joined. Their leadership emphasized the importance of magical research serving practical purposes, developing spells and enchantments that would benefit society while also advancing theoretical understanding. From the Synod's perspective, the College of Winterhold represented both a valuable asset and a potential threat. Its extensive library, prestigious reputation, and concentration of talented mages made it an institution worth recruiting or at least maintaining good relations with. Yet the college's fierce independence and resistance to outside control meant it could not be easily incorporated into the Synod's organizational structure. Initial attempts at establishing formal ties met with polite but firm rebuffs. The college's masters appreciated the Synod's scholarly focus, but had no interest in submitting to external authority or adopting the rigid hierarchical structure the Synod favored. The College of Whispers, the Synod's great rival, approached the situation from a different angle. This organization attracted many former Mages Guild members who had worked in intelligence gathering, security, and other practical applications of magic. They emphasized discreet operations, maintaining secrecy about their membership and activities, while working to gather magical knowledge from any source. The Whispers viewed the College of Winterhold as a treasure trove of information that could be exploited through subtler means than the Synod's direct approach. They sent agents posing as ordinary students or scholars to study at Winterhold, gathering information about the college's research and resources to bring back to their organization. The rivalry between the Synod and Whispers complicated their individual relationships with the college. Each organization feared that the college might align with their rival, giving that faction an insurmountable advantage in influence and resources. This fear led both groups to increase their efforts to cultivate relationships with the college's masters, offering gifts of rare texts and magical items, proposing collaborative research projects, and generally attempting to demonstrate that their organization represented the better partnership option. The college's leadership played these competing interests against each other skillfully, accepting resources from both while committing fully to neither, maintaining leverage through careful ambiguity about its sympathies. The internal debates within the college regarding these relationships reflected broader philosophical tensions. Some masters argued for formal affiliation with the Synod, believing that its scholarly focus aligned well with the college's mission, and that stronger ties could bring valuable resources and opportunities for collaboration. Others favored the Whispers, appreciating their emphasis on practical magic and their willingness to work outside conventional structures. A third faction insisted on maintaining strict neutrality, refusing any formal ties that might compromise the college's independence, even if doing so meant forgoing potential benefits. These debates occasionally grew heated, with personal relationships strained as colleagues found themselves on opposite sides of fundamental questions about the college's future direction. The Thalmor represented a different order of threat, one that transcended the relatively benign competition between the Synod and Whispers. The Almeri Dominion's ideology held that Altmer were inherently superior to other races, and that all significant institutions should ultimately serve Dominion interests. The Thalmor viewed magical knowledge as particularly important, seeing control over magical research and training as essential to maintaining their position of power. After the White Gold Concordat ended the Great War, Thalmor agents began appearing throughout the Empire, ostensibly serving diplomatic and cultural exchange functions, but actually working to extend Dominion influence wherever possible. The Thalmor's approach to the College of Winterhold combined charm and intimidation in ways designed to gradually increase their influence without provoking open resistance. High-ranking Thalmor agents arrived bearing gifts, rare manuscripts from Somerset Isle libraries, enchanted items of exceptional craftsmanship, and offers to fund research projects. They spoke respectfully of the college's history and achievements, positioning themselves as admirers rather than would-be controllers. Behind this diplomatic facade lay clear expectations of reciprocity. The Thalmor expected access to the college's facilities and records, deference to their recommendations about research priorities, and eventual acceptance that Altmer guidance should shape the institution's direction. Ancano, the Thalmor agent who eventually gained a position within the college, exemplified this strategy. He presented himself as a scholar genuinely interested in magical research, someone whose political connections were incidental to his academic pursuits. His knowledge was genuine and impressive, making him a valuable contributor to discussions and collaborative projects. He offered helpful advice to students, shared insights from his studies, and generally made himself useful in ways that justified his presence. Only gradually did his true agenda become apparent, as he positioned himself to observe sensitive research, recruited sympathizers among the students and younger masters, and worked to shift the college's culture toward positions more favorable to Thalmor interests. The college's response to Thalmor infiltration was hampered by divisions among its leadership. Some masters recognized Ancano, and others like him, as threats that should be expelled immediately, regardless of the diplomatic consequences. They argued that allowing Thalmor agents to operate freely within the college compromised its integrity and endangered its independence. Other masters counseled caution, pointing out that the Thalmor commanded considerable military and political power that could be brought to bear against the college if they were antagonized too directly. The college depended on trade routes through Thalmor-influenced territories for supplies, relied on donations from nobles who might face pressure to withdraw support, and existed in a province where the Empire's ability to protect its interests was questionable at best. The situation reached a crisis during the events involving the Eye of Magnus, when Ancano's true intentions finally became impossible to ignore. His attempt to harness the artifact's power for his own purposes, and by extension for the Thalmor, demonstrated that the threats many masters had warned about were real and immediate. The crisis forced a reckoning within the college about how to deal with external influences that sought to corrupt or control the institution. The resolution, while specific to that particular situation, established principles that would guide the college's approach to political pressures going forward. The most fundamental principle that emerged was that the college's independence must be preserved at almost any cost. Collaboration with outside organizations was acceptable when it served the college's interests and advanced magical knowledge, but subordination or allowing external parties to direct research priorities was unacceptable. The college would maintain diplomatic relations with all legitimate magical organizations and governmental bodies, but these relationships would be conducted on terms that protected the institution's autonomy. Masters who received funding from outside sources would be required to disclose those relationships and ensure that their research was not compromised by obligations to their patrons. A second principle addressed the challenge of identifying and managing agents of outside organizations within the college community. Complete exclusion was deemed impractical and potentially counterproductive, as it would damage the college's reputation for being open to all who sought magical knowledge. Instead, the college developed more sophisticated monitoring systems to track relationships between its members and outside organizations. Masters were expected to report significant contact with representatives of foreign powers or rival magical institutions. Students, whose behavior suggested they might be reporting to external parties, were observed more closely, and their access to sensitive materials restricted. These measures stopped short of true paranoia, but reflected a more realistic understanding of the political environment in which the college operated. The relationship between the college and the Synod evolved into cautious cooperation, based on clearly defined boundaries. The Synod abandoned its early ambitions of incorporating Winterhold into its organizational structure, accepting that the college would remain independent. In exchange, the college agreed to share certain research findings with the Synod, participate in joint conferences and symposia, and generally maintain cordial relations. Students and masters could hold membership in both institutions without conflict, allowing individuals to benefit from the resources and connections each offered, while the institutions themselves remained separate. This arrangement satisfied neither organization entirely, but proved workable and prevented wasteful conflict that would have benefited neither side. The college's relationship with the College of Whispers remained more ambiguous and problematic. The Whispers' emphasis on secrecy and their use of infiltration tactics made direct cooperation difficult to arrange or maintain. The college knew that Whispers agents operated within its community, but lacked reliable means of identifying them or determining their actual activities. This created a low-level background anxiety that anyone might be reporting to the Whispers, though in practice most members of the college community had no such affiliations. Occasional attempts to establish formal channels of communication between the institutions founded on mutual distrust and incompatible organizational cultures. The Thalmor remained the most serious long-term concern, as their supremacist ideology and powerful backing made them capable of sustained pressure that other organizations could not match. The college developed a strategy of strategic compliance and resistance, cooperating with Thalmor requests when refusal would provoke confrontation, while resisting in ways that preserved its core values and independence. Thalmor agents were allowed to visit and study at the college, but their access to the most sensitive areas and materials was quietly restricted. Research that the Thalmor particularly wanted to control or suppress continued discreetly, with results shared selectively or not at all. The college maintained polite diplomatic relations while ensuring that the Dominion could never claim authority over the institution. These political struggles took a toll on the college's focus and resources. Masters spent time and energy navigating complex relationships with outside organizations rather than focusing entirely on research and teaching. Students became aware of political dimensions to their studies that ideally should have been irrelevant to the pursuit of magical knowledge. Resources that could have been devoted to expanding the library or improving facilities were instead spent on security measures and diplomatic efforts. Yet these costs, burdensome as they were, remained preferable to the alternatives. Subordination to any outside organization would have fundamentally altered the college's character and mission. Complete isolation from the broader magical community would have cut off valuable sources of knowledge and collaboration. The uncomfortable middle path of engagement without surrender represented the best available option in an imperfect political landscape. Looking ahead, the college's leadership recognizes that political pressures are likely to intensify rather than diminish. The Synod and Whispers will continue their rivalry, seeking any advantage they can gain. The Thalmor's long-term plans for Tamriel almost certainly include bringing major magical institutions under their control or influence. New political forces may emerge with their own agendas regarding how magic should be studied and controlled. The college must remain vigilant and adaptable, updating its strategies as circumstances change, while holding firm to the core principles that have allowed it to survive previous crises. Its independence, earned through millennia of determined resistance to outside control, remains precious and precarious, requiring constant effort to maintain against those who would see it compromised or destroyed. Legends and ghost stories. The College of Winterhold's ancient halls harbour more than living mages and carefully catalogued knowledge. Centuries of magical experimentation, tragic accidents, and human drama have left impressions that persist beyond death and rational explanation. Students and masters alike whisper stories of spectral figures glimpsed in corridors, unexplained phenomena that defy even magical analysis, and locations within the college grounds where reality seems slightly unhinged from normal laws. These legends and ghost stories form an unofficial oral tradition, passed from one generation to the next, adding layers of mystery and unease to an institution already steeped in history and arcane power. Whether these tales reflect genuine supernatural phenomena or simply the products of overactive imaginations influenced by long nights of study and the inherent eeriness of ancient magical institutions, remains a matter of debate. One of the most frequently reported apparitions is the figure known simply as the Weeping Scholar, a translucent form seen most often in the Arcanium during the darkest hours before dawn. Witnesses describe a robed figure standing among the bookshelves, sometimes reaching toward volumes as if searching for a particular text, other times simply standing motionless with head bowed in an attitude of profound sorrow. Those who have approached the figure report that it vanishes when directly confronted, fading like mist in morning sunlight. Some claim to have heard soft weeping or muttered words in a language they cannot identify before the apparition disappears. The most common explanation for the Weeping Scholar identifies it as the ghost of an early college master who supposedly died while researching a particularly dangerous topic, his life taken by magical backlash, moments before he could record the breakthrough he had achieved. According to this interpretation, his spirit remains bound to the library, endlessly searching for the book where he intended to write his discoveries, unable to rest while his life's work remains incomplete. Alternative versions of the story suggest the figure is not a single ghost, but rather a manifestation of collective grief from all the scholars who died before completing their research, their combined regret creating a persistent spiritual echo. Skeptics within the college point out that no historical records clearly document the death of any master in circumstances matching this legend, though they acknowledge that incomplete records from the college's earliest years leave room for such an event to have occurred without clear documentation. The psychological explanation suggests that students and masters, working late in the library under stress and fatigue, occasionally experience hallucinations or misinterpret shadows and architectural features as human figures. Yet the consistency of the descriptions across centuries and from witnesses who had no prior knowledge of the legend suggests that either something genuinely anomalous exists, or the human mind follows remarkably predictable patterns when constructing ghostly visions. The Hall of the Elements, where students gather for important ceremonies and where major magical events have occurred, is said to be haunted by the spirits of those who died during the Great Collapse. Witnesses report seeing translucent figures moving through the hall, sometimes walking through walls where doorways existed in the old city before it fell into the sea. These spirits allegedly appear most frequently during storms, when the sound of wind and waves crashing against the cliffs creates an atmosphere that somehow thins the barrier between the living world and whatever realm the dead inhabit. The figures never interact with the living, simply continuing whatever activity they were engaged in at the moment of death, endlessly replaying their final moments. One particularly detailed account comes from a student who claimed to witness an entire phantom crowd fleeing through the hall during a winter storm. She described seeing dozens of translucent figures, men, women, and children, all moving with desperate urgency toward where the exit would have been in the old city's layout. Their faces showed terror, and some appeared injured, bearing wounds that didn't bleed. The student reported that she could hear faint screams and crying mixed with the storm's roar, sounds that couldn't be explained by wind alone. When she tried to photograph the phenomenon using a magical recording device, the apparatus malfunctioned, producing only distorted images that showed nothing unusual, despite her insistence that the apparitions remain visible throughout. The college's masters take reports of collapse-related hauntings seriously, not necessarily because they believe in literal ghosts, but because the trauma of that disaster left deep psychological scars on the institution. Some suggest that what students interpret as ghosts might actually be magical echoes, recordings of past events somehow preserved in the stones and timbers of the college through the intense emotional and magical energy released during the catastrophe. Under this theory, witnesses aren't seeing actual spirits, but rather something more akin to recordings that replay under certain conditions. Whether this explanation is more or less unsettling than actual ghosts remains a matter of personal perspective. The Western Tower, partially rebuilt after sustaining severe damage in the Great Collapse, has its own reputation for supernatural activity. Students assigned to rooms in this section report frequent unexplained occurrences. Objects moving when no one is watching, doors opening and closing on their own, sudden temperature drops that create patches of frost on walls, and most disturbingly, the sensation of being watched by something unseen. Some claim to have awakened in the night to find a dark figure standing beside their bed, a presence that radiates hostility and cold before vanishing when the student fully awakens and calls for light. The most detailed account of the Western Tower's haunting comes from an advanced student of destruction magic who lived there for an entire academic year. She kept a journal documenting strange occurrences, initially approaching the situation with skeptical curiosity about whether supernatural phenomena could be studied scientifically. Her early entries describe minor oddities: a book left on her desk appearing on a shelf the next morning despite no one entering her room, faint knocking sounds with no identifiable source, the feeling of cold drafts in sealed rooms. As the year progressed, the phenomena intensified. She reported finding messages written in frost on her mirror, words in Elder Futhark runes that she couldn't fully translate but which seemed to be warnings or threats. Objects began moving in her direct sight, rather than only when she wasn't looking, a particularly unnerving escalation that made her question her sanity. The student's final entry, written shortly before she requested reassignment to different quarters, described an encounter that broke her scholarly detachment. She had awakened to find her room filled with unnatural darkness that her mage light couldn't penetrate, and within that darkness, something moved and breathed. She could feel its attention focused on her, malevolent and ancient, and she heard a voice that seemed to speak directly into her mind rather than through her ears. The voice accused her of trespassing, demanded she leave, and promised terrible consequences if she remained. When she finally managed to cast a powerful light spell, the darkness retreated, but not before she glimpsed something she described only as wrong, a presence whose nature violated her understanding of what should be possible. The college's investigation into this incident found evidence supporting some of the students' claims. Her room showed unusually high levels of residual magical energy that couldn't be explained by her own spellcasting. The mirror did indeed bear frost rune markings, and while these could theoretically have been self-inflicted, no evidence suggested the student had reason to fabricate such an elaborate hoax. The room's history revealed that it had been occupied by a master who died under mysterious circumstances decades earlier, though records were vague about the exact details of his death. The college ultimately decided to seal the room and excuse the student from her lease without prejudice, a decision that some viewed as validation of her experience and others saw as unnecessary capitulation to superstition. The Midden, with its dark corridors and history as a repository for dangerous experiments and artifacts, naturally spawns numerous ghost stories. Students tell of hearing footsteps echoing through empty tunnels, finding doors they had secured standing open, and encountering sudden inexplicable fear in certain sections that makes even seasoned adventurers reluctant to proceed. Some report seeing lights moving in the distance, bobbing like lanterns carried by unseen travelers that vanish when pursued. Others speak of hearing voices engaged in conversation or argument, though the words remain too indistinct to understand, and the speakers are never found. One particular chamber in the Midden's lower levels has earned the nickname the Quiet Room, from students who know its reputation. Those who enter this space report experiencing an overwhelming sense of peace and tranquility that feels profoundly unnatural in the Midden's generally oppressive atmosphere. The sensation is so strong that some describe it as euphoric, a feeling of contentment and safety that makes them reluctant to leave despite knowing intellectually that they should be concerned about such an anomalous effect. Masters warn students to avoid the Quiet Room specifically because this euphoria could mask genuine dangers, and several individuals who have spent extended time there have emerged subtly changed, displaying flattened affect and reduced emotional responsiveness that persists for days or weeks afterward. Theories about the Quiet Room range from residual enchantments left by ancient college masters who used the space for meditation, to more sinister explanations involving spiritual parasites that feed on emotional energy or daedric influence that lulls victims into complacency before claiming them. The college has considered sealing the chamber entirely, but decided against it, reasoning that students determined to explore the Midden would simply find other dangerous areas to investigate, and that the Quiet Room's effects, while concerning, have not proven permanently harmful to anyone who has experienced them. This pragmatic approach to supernatural hazards reflects the college's general philosophy that mages must learn to identify and respond to unusual phenomena, rather than being sheltered from all potential dangers. Perhaps the most unsettling legend associated with the college involves an entity known as the Observer, described as something that watches from the edges of perception, never fully seen but somehow known to be present. Reports of the Observer come almost exclusively from mages engaged in particularly advanced or risky research, particularly those working with conjuration magic or attempting to peer into oblivion. These mages describe becoming aware of a presence during their work, a sense of being studied by something vast and incomprehensible that exists outside normal space and time. Unlike the more concrete ghosts and spirits reported elsewhere in the college, the Observer never manifests in a visible form, existing only as a creeping awareness that one is not alone, that something is paying very close attention to one's activities. What makes the Observer particularly disturbing is that reports of this entity come from highly credible sources, experienced masters whose judgment and observational skills are beyond question. These are not students prone to flights of fancy or researchers who might hallucinate under stress, but rather the the college's most accomplished scholars, people whose word carries weight in any discussion of magical phenomena. The consistency of their descriptions, despite occurring independently across decades, suggests they are reporting something genuinely real, though what that something might be remains entirely unclear. One hypothesis suggests the observer might be a Daedric prince or similarly powerful entity that takes interest in certain types of magical research and monitors those engaged in such work. The attention could be simple curiosity from a being that exists outside mortal limitations and finds the struggles of mages to understand cosmic forces amusing or interesting. Alternatively, the observer might represent something more predatory, an entity that feeds on magical energy or the mental efforts of researchers, remaining just beyond perception to avoid triggering defensive responses. The most disturbing theory proposes that the observer is always present, watching everything that occurs within the college, and that most people simply lack the sensitivity to detect its presence. Only when individuals reach certain levels of magical development do they become aware of something that has been watching them all along. The college's official position on these legends and ghost stories is skeptical, but not dismissive. Masters acknowledge that reports of unusual phenomena come too frequently and from too many credible sources to simply ignore. Yet they also recognize how easily human perception can be deceived, particularly in environments saturated with magical energy and historical significance. The college maintains records of reported supernatural encounters, analyzing them for patterns that might reveal underlying causes or principles. Some masters conduct ongoing research into what they term post-mortem magical phenomena, attempting to determine whether ghosts represent actual disembodied consciousness or some other form of persistent spiritual or magical energy. Regardless of their ultimate reality, these legends serve important functions within the college community. They remind students and masters alike that magic, for all its power and utility, remains connected to forces that transcend complete understanding. They create a sense of continuity with the past, linking current generations to the long history of mages who studied in these same halls. They provide cautionary tales that reinforce the importance of safety and respect when dealing with powerful forces. And perhaps most importantly, they maintain an element of mystery and wonder in an institution dedicated to rational inquiry, reminding all who work there that for all the knowledge accumulated over millennia, the universe retains secrets that may never be fully revealed or explained. The college's future and legacy. As the Fourth Era progresses, and Tamriel continues to change in ways both predictable and surprising, the College of Winterhold stands at a crossroads whose implications extend far beyond its ancient walls. The institution has survived for thousands of years through catastrophes, political upheavals, and shifting attitudes toward magic, but the challenges it faces in the current era may prove more complex and dangerous than any previously encountered. The combination of political pressures from the Thalmor, competition from rival magical organizations, lingering effects of the Great Collapse, and the general decline of magical education across Tamriel creates an environment where the college's continued survival and relevance cannot be taken for granted. Understanding its future requires examining both the threats it must overcome and the strengths it can draw upon. The most immediate challenge facing the college involves maintaining enrollment and ensuring that talented young mages continue to seek training at Winterhold. The institution's remote location, harsh climate, and association with the Great Collapse make it a difficult sell compared to more accessible alternatives. Parents who might send magically gifted children to study at the college often choose other options, whether informal apprenticeships with local mages, enrollment at smaller regional academies, or attempting to suppress their children's magical talents entirely, rather than exposing them to the dangers and difficulties associated with formal magical education. The decline in enrollment has created a vicious cycle where reduced student numbers mean fewer fees and donations, leading to budget constraints that make it harder to maintain facilities and attract top teaching talent. The college has responded to this challenge through several initiatives designed to make magical education at Winterhold more attractive and accessible. Outreach programs send masters to communities across Skyrim to identify promising young mages and explain the benefits of formal training. Scholarship programs provide financial support for talented students who cannot afford the college's fees, ensuring that economic barriers don't prevent capable individuals from receiving education. The curriculum has been updated to include more practical training alongside traditional theoretical study, responding to criticism that the college's teaching was too abstract and disconnected from real-world applications of magic. These efforts have helped stabilize enrollment, though numbers remain well below the college's historical peak. The question of how to balance tradition with innovation divides the college's masters and shapes debates about its future direction. Conservatives argue that the college's strength has always come from its commitment to rigorous study of magical fundamentals and theoretical principles, that abandoning this traditional focus in favor of more practical training would compromise the institution's character and reduce it to little more than a technical school for combat mages. They worry that making the college more accessible and less demanding will attract students who lack genuine commitment to serious magical study, diluting the quality of research and teaching. They point to the institution's long history of producing accomplished mages through demanding traditional methods as evidence that these approaches work and should not be discarded. Reformers counter that tradition without adaptation leads to irrelevance, that the college must evolve to meet the changing needs of Tamriel's magical community, or risk becoming a museum rather than a living institution. They argue that practical magical training and theoretical study are not mutually exclusive, that skilled combat mages and enchanters need solid theoretical foundations, while pure theoreticians benefit from understanding how their work applies to real problems. They note that the Mages Guild succeeded for centuries by making magic accessible and useful to ordinary people, and that the college can learn from this example without abandoning its commitment to serious scholarship. These debates remain unresolved, with the college's direction shifting based on which faction holds more influence at any given time. The relationship with the Thalmor continues to pose serious long-term concerns. The Aldmeri Dominion has demonstrated willingness to pursue its goals through patient, multi-generational strategies, and there is no reason to believe they have abandoned their interest in controlling or influencing the college. Future attempts at infiltration or co-optation may prove more sophisticated and harder to detect than Ancano's relatively obvious machinations. The college must maintain constant vigilance without descending into paranoia that would poison its atmosphere and damage its reputation as an institution open to all who seek knowledge. This balance requires wisdom and discernment that cannot be reduced to simple rules or procedures. The broader political situation in Skyrim also affects the college's prospects. The civil war between Imperial and Stormcloak factions creates uncertainty about who will ultimately control the province and what policies they will implement regarding magic and magical institutions. a Stormcloak victory might bring increased Nordic nationalism that could manifest as hostility toward the college, particularly if Ulfric Stormcloak or his successors choose to scapegoat mages as foreign influences corrupting traditional Nordic culture. An imperial victory would maintain the status quo, but would also leave Skyrim subject to the terms of the White Gold Concordat, including provisions that favor Thalmor interests. The college's independence from secular authority protects it somewhat from these political shifts, but no institution can remain entirely insulated from the political environment in which it operates. The college's greatest strength for facing these challenges lies in its accumulated knowledge and the expertise of its masters. The Arcanium contains texts that exist nowhere else in Tamriel, information that scholars across the continent would love to access. The Masters represent some of the finest magical minds of their generation, people whose research contributes to advancing understanding across all schools of magic. This intellectual capital makes the college valuable to any regime that recognizes the importance of magical knowledge, providing leverage in negotiations and creating incentives for powerful parties to support the institution rather than suppress it. As long as the college continues to produce valuable research and train competent mages, it will have patrons willing to protect and fund it. The potential for breakthrough discoveries offers another path towards securing the college's future. The Eye of Magnus incident, despite its dangers, demonstrated that artifacts of tremendous power remain hidden throughout Skyrim, and that the college possesses the expertise to study such items safely when proper protocols are followed. Future expeditions to Nordic ruins, Dwemer facilities, or other ancient sites may uncover additional artifacts that advance magical knowledge dramatically. The college is uniquely positioned to conduct such research, combining archaeological expertise, magical analysis capabilities, and secure facilities for containing and studying dangerous objects. Success in this area could restore the college's reputation and attract the resources needed for long-term sustainability. The question of succession and leadership development weighs heavily on those thinking about the college's future. The position of Archmage, while prestigious, is also enormously demanding, requiring not just magical expertise but also administrative skill, political acumen, and the ability to navigate complex relationships with multiple outside parties. Identifying and preparing potential future Archmages is essential but difficult, as the qualities that make someone an excellent researcher or teacher don't necessarily translate into effective institutional leadership. The college has begun paying more attention to leadership development, ensuring that promising masters gain experience in administration and diplomacy before being thrust into positions where these skills are essential. The possibility of establishing satellite facilities or partnerships with other institutions offers both opportunities and risks. A college presence in more accessible locations could address concerns about Winterhold's isolation, while spreading the institution's influence and making its resources available to more students. However, maintaining quality and consistency across multiple sites would be challenging, and satellite facilities might gradually develop their own identities that conflict with the main college's priorities and culture. Partnership arrangements with regional academies or even with the Synod or Whispers could provide mutual benefits, but might also compromise the college's independence or create conflicts when partners' interests diverge. The role of technology and magical innovation in the college's future remains an open question. Discoveries in enchanting might lead to new ways of preserving knowledge or training students. Advances in conjuration could open access to resources and information from oblivion. Breakthroughs in alteration might make travel to and from Winterhold easier, or create ways to expand the college's facilities without expensive physical construction. Yet, technological change also brings risks, as new capabilities can disrupt traditional practices and create unexpected problems. The college must remain open to innovation while ensuring that changes serve its fundamental mission, rather than simply pursuing novelty for its own sake. The preservation of knowledge stands as perhaps the college's most important contribution to Tamriel's future. The Arcanium contains information that would be lost forever if the college ceased to exist, including unique magical techniques, historical records, and theoretical frameworks that inform current research. Even if the college never made another discovery, its role in safeguarding existing knowledge would justify its continued existence. This archival function becomes more important as other magical institutions decline or are destroyed, making the college one of the few repositories of comprehensive magical knowledge remaining in Tamriel. The responsibility for preserving this information for future generations weighs heavily on the current leadership and shapes many decisions about resource allocation and institutional priorities. The human element of the college's legacy deserves consideration alongside its institutional and intellectual contributions. Thousands of students have passed through Winterhold over the millennia, each carrying away not just magical knowledge, but also experiences, relationships, and perspectives that shape their lives and work. These individuals have gone on to serve as court wizards, adventurers, researchers, teachers, healers, and countless other roles across Tamriel, bringing the college's influence to places far from Winterhold itself. The networks of alumni form an invisible web connecting the college to the broader magical community, creating opportunities for collaboration and mutual support that extend the institution's reach far beyond its physical location. Looking ahead to the coming decades and centuries, the College of Winterhold will need to draw upon all its accumulated wisdom, resources, and resilience to navigate the challenges ahead. The combination of political pressures, competition for students and resources, and the ongoing recovery from the Great Collapse's effects creates an environment where the institution's survival cannot be taken for granted. Yet the college has survived worse, has weathered previous eras when its future seemed uncertain, and has consistently found ways to adapt while preserving its essential character and mission. The same determination that sustained it through wars, catastrophes, and political upheavals remains present in the current generation of masters and students who have dedicated themselves to magical study. The legacy the college leaves for future generations extends beyond specific achievements or individual discoveries to encompass a broader commitment to the pursuit of knowledge itself. In an often chaotic and violent world, where immediate concerns frequently overshadow long-term thinking, the college represents continuity and dedication to understanding, a place where questions can be asked and pursued, regardless of their immediate practical utility. This commitment to knowledge for its own sake, while sometimes criticized as ivory tower detachment, serves an essential function in advancing civilization and expanding the boundaries of what is possible through magic. As the sun sets over the sea of ghosts and lights begin appearing in the college's windows, as students gather for evening meals and masters return to their research, the ancient institution continues its work much as it has for thousands of years. The specifics change. New faces arrive while others depart. Research projects begin and conclude, but the fundamental rhythm persists. The College of Winterhold endures, a testament to human curiosity, and the enduring value of pursuing understanding even in the face of countless challenges. Whatever the future holds, whatever tests and trials lie ahead, the college will face them with the same combination of wisdom and courage that has sustained it through its long history, adapting as necessary while remaining true to the mission that has always defined it: the advancement of magical knowledge and the training of those who would wield the arcane arts. The story of the College of Winterhold is far from complete. New chapters continue to be written with each student who arrives at its gates, each discovery made in its laboratories, each crisis navigated by its leadership. The institution's future remains unwritten, shaped by choices yet to be made and circumstances yet to unfold. Yet as long as there are those who seek to understand magic's mysteries, who value knowledge over ignorance and wisdom over blind tradition, the college will have a purpose and a place in Tamriel. Its walls may be weathered by time and battered by storms, its history marked by tragedy alongside triumph, but it stands as a reminder that the pursuit of understanding transcends individual lifetimes and remains one of humanity's noblest endeavors. The College of Winterhold has been many things over its long existence: a refuge for those who sought to study magic without interference, a storehouse of knowledge accumulated over millennia, a training ground for generations of accomplished mages, and a symbol of both magic's potential and its dangers. It has been praised and feared, celebrated and condemned, but never ignored. Its story intertwines with Skyrim's history and Tamriel's broader narrative, touching countless lives and shaping the development of magical practice across the continent. As we reflect on this history, we see not just an institution, but a living embodiment of the eternal human drive to understand, to discover, to push beyond current limitations in search of greater knowledge and capability. Thank you for journeying with me tonight, Cozy Nights. If this story helped you rest, consider leaving a like. It helps other weary travelers find their way to our fireside. And remember, there are many more tales waiting for you here by the fire. So don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next adventure. Until next time, sleep peacefully and have a cozy night.